3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The government is urgently investigating severe delays to the postal vote delivery. The Royal Mail says ballot packs are being delivered as soon as they arrive, but thousands fear they won't get there in time. We'll have all the details.
And another Reform UK bombshell as a second candidate defects to the Conservatives, accusing fellow candidates of being racist and misogynistic.
The Labour leader says he'll clock off at 6 on Fridays if he wins the election. But will he be a part-time Prime Minister? Or is he right to protect his family time?
And an end of an era for one of our greatest ever sports stars. Former Wimbledon and Olympic champion Andy Murray has pulled out of this year's singles tournament due to injury. At this, his last Wimbledon.
And what a delight it is to have Mrs. Emily Carver. Well, Emily Christie's, but Emily Carver.
Emily Carver on the telly. Emily Christie's at home.
There we go. It's nice to have that delineation in life.
And may I say, I did invite Tom to the wedding, and he was the life and soul of the party, as you can imagine. I think you said hello to every single guest there, which is rather nice.
It was very easy to be, like, just so happy at such a wonderful ceremony with so much light and music and laughter and joy and love.
And I should say, there was lots of you who've given us such lovely well wishes. A bit of speculation over when the actual date was. But yes, it was Sunday and we had a fabulous time. So thank you for sending lots of love and well wishes. But we also want to talk about these postal votes. Are you one of these people who's been caught up in these delays?
Yeah, it's a big, big question because a lot of people, of course, will struggle to get to a polling station on the day. Will people actually be disenfranchised due to these delays? And what can be done about it? We'll be asking all of those questions throughout the show. But we want to hear your views and your stories. Do you have a postal vote?
Yes, and what do you make of the fact that it's been estimated that 20 to 25% of people with a vote are doing it via the post? Let us know your thoughts on that. gbnews.com/your say.
Well, let's get your headlines with Ray.
Thanks, guys. Good afternoon. 2 minutes past 12, your top stories this hour. So Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes can't be counted due to Royal Mail delays. The Postal Affairs Minister is said to be urgently investigating after issues with the printing and delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. Kevin Hollinrake is understood to be in direct contact with the company and visited depots as well. GB News asked Sir Keir if recounts may be necessary.
Look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
Well, Health Minister Maria Caulfield told us earlier that Mr Hollinrake is personally visiting those depots.
My understanding is local councils have sent out those postal ballots, so it is a Royal Mail issue rather than a local council issue. What I would say to your viewers, if their postal votes are arriving late, they can still take them to the polling stations on the day if they're worried that they won't get back in time. But there is concern in a few constituencies, not all, and not a huge number that we're picking up. But where there are, Kevin Hollinrake is personally meeting with Royal Mail to try and get this resolved urgently.
A candidate for Reform UK has suspended her campaign and defected to the Conservatives. Georgie David says she's frustrated and dismayed by the party and accused the, quote, vast majority of candidates of being, quote, racist and misogynistic. She's the second Reform candidate to defect to the Tories in 2 days. The PM is making a final pitch to voters today, urging wavering Tories to stick with his party and prevent a Labour supermajority. He was up bright and early this morning, meeting warehouse workers in Bedfordshire. He toured the Ocado facility and even enjoyed a cup of tea in the staff canteen. Then on this, the penultimate day of the election campaign, he spoke to workers in Oxfordshire, where he said that Labour can be denied that majority if just 130,000 people switch their votes.
If we give Labour that blank cheque, you won't be able to get it back, and all of you are going to end up paying much more in taxes. And I don't want to see that happen, right? So when you think about voting on Thursday, if you vote Conservative, it is a vote for lower taxes, because I believe you will work incredibly hard, and I want you to enjoy the benefits of that hard work and keep more of your money for yourselves to spend on what you want and to spend on your families.
Well, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he can get on with the change we need. Sir Keir says two of his key priorities include reforming the planning system and improving the economy. Former Labour MP Sean Simon told us earlier that the Tories are trying to convince Labour supporters their vote isn't needed.
Since they started doing it, I have always thought this tactic would work. I think it's almost bound to work. If you can really convince people that it's a foregone conclusion, it's all over, and the question is only whether Labour win by a ridiculous, unnecessary margin, inevitably some people are going to stay at home. And that's why Labour now is so determined to say, no, you've got to get out and vote. If you want change, vote for it.
The Lib Dem leader is urging voters to help him topple Conservative seats like dominoes. Sir Ed Davey is highlighting his party's plan to create a clean water authority, which would have new powers to prevent sewage dumping. They also want to ban bonuses for water bosses until discharges and leaks stop, and turn water suppliers into public benefit companies. The Green Party says it will abolish Ofsted to help reduce stresses and improve well-being in schools if they win the general election. The party is also pledging to scrap tuition fees and provide free school meals for all children. Meanwhile, continuous assessments would replace SATs, and co-leader Carla Denyer is describing their education package as an A-star offering. Hurricane Beryl is strengthening into a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm as it moves across the eastern Caribbean. The ferocious storm has already killed at least one person yesterday and inflicted large-scale damage across entire islands. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surge. The Royal Mint has honoured Team GB and Paralympics GB athletes with a new 50p coin. Comes ahead of the Paris 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. The collectible, which costs, with starting prices costing from £12, features athletes against a backdrop of the Union flag with a silhouette of the Eiffel Tower. The Royal Mint says they hope the coin serves as a, quote, special good luck token. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12, and there are just 2 days left until the UK goes to the polls.
Yes, the leaders are all pushing for your vote, but will they all arrive in time? That's the question today.
It's as the Postal Affairs Minister Kevin Hollinrake sits out at Royal Mail for failing to deliver with a huge surge in demand.
Yes, the Royal Mail has, though, hit back at the government, saying there's no backlog in their system. And so it seems like the government is saying it's the Royal Mail's fault. The Royal Mail is saying it's the government's fault. So whose fault is it?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a circular firing squad and no one's getting their postal vote. But we want to know, have you got your postal vote? Or are you one of these people who is still there squatting by your doormat, waiting for it to land? Because, my goodness me, time is running short and there could be people who do not get to vote if this all goes wrong. We're going to be asking experts about what the recourse is for those who do want to vote and the postal vote has not arrived. There are rights, there are emergency things that can be done, so all is not over.
Yeah, so it'd be a bit of a nightmare, actually, if you're planning to have a postal vote, doesn't arrive and you can't get it there in time. Alison says, though, my husband ordered his postal vote in a timely manner, filled it in and sent it back last week. It's people leaving it until the last minute. Well, so there you go, Alison doesn't have any sympathy.
No, but there are some areas where these postal votes arrived weeks ago and other areas where people are still waiting. It's a postcode lottery.
Well, shall we speak to Theo Gicomba, who's outside a delivery office for us. Theo, give us a bit more detail on this. What exactly is the problem?
Well, as you can see, the rains are coming down, the clouds, it's all coming down today, and it's been a lot of toing and froing between the post office and the government today. And now we understand that there are around 90 constituencies across the UK which haven't had their postal ballots arrive on time. With only 2 days left, people are wondering what's going on. There's been criticism, particularly north of the border in Scotland, where school children and their families went on holiday last week, Friday. So inevitably, a lot of them have gone out of the country on holiday and they weren't able to get their ballots on time. And it's an interesting time as well because most people would be able to make the most of proxy votes, which allows someone else to go and take your vote for you. But if you are not expecting this issue and you're hoping your ballot would arrive on time to your home, you now find yourself in this situation. Now, the Postal Affairs Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, has hit out at the Postal Service and he said is investigating this issue, which is leaving thousands of people unable to do the postal vote that they wanted to for a number of reasons. Some may be leaving the country on holiday or aren't able to make it on Thursday. That deadline is 10 p.m. For those who are looking to vote on that day. Now, we have heard this morning that those who are unable to get those postal ballots in on time, they may have to go to their local voting centres to put their ballots in that way, which is maybe not the ideal situation they would have wanted to find themselves in. But the post office themselves say there isn't a backlog issue, and they say things are running as they should. But those places which they do understand are having issues, they are investigating, and they're saying the system is working, and they're looking to ensure that those who are waiting for their postal votes are able to do so. So only 2 days left, and many people will be hoping that they arrive on time.
Well, let's hope that does take place. 90 constituencies. My goodness me, what a large number. But Theo Gicomba, for now, thank you very much.
Yes, very interesting to think whether this could actually make a dent in the polls, in the actual vote on Thursday. Anyway, joining us now, Christopher Hope from the Labour battle bus. Christopher, bring us up to date with what's going on Labour side.
That's right. Well, the Labour are also concerned about this issue of postal ballots. We heard from Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader of the SNP. We've heard from the Tory side, of course, Kevin Hollinrake, who's the Postal Affairs Minister. I asked Sir Keir Starmer if he was worried about the issue of postal ballots, and this is what he had to say.
Look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
And what's interesting there is I had asked him, will there be any required recounts in some seats? And he said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Now, that does raise the prospect right now, Tom and Emily, of if people don't get their postal votes in time and they can't cast their vote in a seat where it might go, just a few votes here and there could settle it, there could be calls for recounts of some seats going into next week. Friday may not be the final day of this election campaign.
Chris, are you saying that if a postal vote arrives late, it could be counted in the event of a recount?
Well, my question there to Sir Keir Starmer, which I think was cut off from that clip, but I said, should there be recounts in some seats if people's postal ballots are not counted? And he said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And I think that's very interesting, because I think if this election is tighter than the polls suggest, and in the past, in 2017 notably, the polls have narrowed and been completely wrong in some cases, you could see some seats, an increasing call to recount the vote in some seats if a pile of postal ballots are found and haven't been counted.
And Christopher, on a different note, how are the Labour camp feeling about these comments by Keir Starmer about clocking off on Fridays at 6 o'clock? There's been a huge amount of interest in these comments. The suggestion from the Conservatives that Keir Starmer will be a part-time Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, it's yes. They're saying that, you know, of course, if he's busy, if world events happen on a Friday night after 6 o'clock, he'll do that. I mean, he's always said, hasn't he, that he observes the Sabbath starting at 6 p.m. with his family. His wife Victoria is Jewish. I should say they're giving out pillows on the bus. Can you see this?
Hang on, Chris. We'll just hold on for one moment. We'll get you back in vision, which will be happening any moment now. Here we go.
Oh,
we can see it.
Yeah.
Don't wake up to 5 more years of the Tories. My goodness. That's quite a
rather strange picture there of...
Don't know how to describe that picture of Rishi Sunak. I don't know if it's dishy or otherwise.
Well, it looks a bit. It's a bit like David Beckham when he was asleep, wasn't he? And he was by the artist Sam Taylor Johnson, filmed him when he was asleep. But the point is, I mean, that's a different argument about don't mess it up and don't make sure you do vote for Labour. The party is saying, or they are concerned that these polls could well be out and it could be much tighter than everyone thinks. But yeah, the idea that there's no question that Tories are trying to show of a young candidate up at 4 a.m. with our colleague Catherine Forster. He gave up McDonald's breakfast to colleagues on the press bus with them. He's at Morrison's just now. He's trying to show a vigorous young leader. Of course, Keir Starmer is 61, but he's a young 61. So I think whether they're trying to get some idea of vitality, but the message from the Tory party is you know, don't hand Labour a huge majority.
Yeah. Well, I suppose at least none of them are Joe Biden. But Christopher Hope, thank you very much for joining us live from the Labour battle bus.
Yes, none of our candidates are in their 80s, as far as I know. Anyway, we've been talking about the postal voting situation, and we've got a response from Royal Mail. They say we'll be carrying out sweeps at our mail centres and delivery offices to ensure all postal votes in the network are identified and returned to the relevant local authority before the close of poll stations.
They add, we will also have additional people on the ground in our mail centres on Thursday evening, identifying and pulling postal votes for delivery to local authorities.
Sounds quite a complex mission, doesn't it?
Certainly. Well, let's get either side from the Conservative battle bus now, where our political correspondent Catherine Forster is. Because, Catherine, we've been hearing from the Labour Party saying that don't wake up with Rishi, but the Conservatives seem to be promoting Rishi's youth and vitality.
So yesterday I was in a distillery. They certainly are, and well, they might be. Good afternoon to both of you. I was up at 2 o'clock this morning. This Conservative battle bus departed from the hotel at 3:15. By 4:45, I was on a visit with the Prime Minister at an Ocado depot in Luton, where he was helping pack people's shopping with quite a lot of help from some rather amazing robots. By 7 o'clock, we were in a Morrison's where he was stacking the shelves with bread. And then we moved on to somewhere else where he still is, so I can't tell you, but we're basically in deepest Oxfordshire. We've been in a couple of super safe Tory seats, if such a thing exists anymore. I think the problem for the Conservatives is that such a thing does not exist anymore. We were in Witney. That was, of course, David Cameron's seat. It's currently held with a 15,000 majority, but the Lib Dems think they can take it. So we're now arriving for the fourth visit of the day, and it is literally just after 12 o'clock. The Prime Minister is going to be finishing up with an event late this evening back in London, so really quite an insane schedule. And I have to say, I've been with the Prime Minister to Berlin, to Warsaw and to Vienna, and the schedule has always been equally brutal. In the case of Vienna, we were literally only on the ground for 12 hours, and that included sleeping. You were talking about Labour. They were giving out pillows, weren't they, yesterday to journalists, talking about don't wake up with another 5 years of Rishi Sunak. So the Conservatives' gift to us today, you might have seen this in a few attack ads, if you think Labour will win, start saving. I have to tell you, it rattles. I've checked it. There's 15 coins in here. Sad to say, though, they're chocolate, so they probably won't last the day. But anyway, they're clearly playing a very defensive game. We are here in very safe Conservative seats. But the Prime Minister, talking to us just a little bit earlier, still seems to believe to play for. I did ask him if he isn't frustrated with what he inherited from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and he said, look, you've got to deal with the cards that you've got. There's no point wishing you had 4 aces, but keen to talk about the future. But he seems to be optimistic, but I have to say not very many of his candidates seem to be.
Well, Catherine Forster, live from the Conservative battle bus with your plastic pig full of chocolate coins. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, Rishi Sunak seems to be campaigning for a hung parliament at this point.
Which is strange, actually, given that in the last election, the Conservatives campaigned saying that hung parliaments are terrible and we should avoid them at any cost and give the Conservatives a majority.
I guess, in their mind, a lot better than a Labour supermajority.
Yeah, I suppose there'll be lots of people who think perhaps that is the case. Although I must be saying, we talk about the economic situation in the country right now. Buy shares in novelty product companies producing printed pillows and little plastic pigs. They must be doing good business right now with all the parties.
Yes, I imagine. But another big story today is, of course, these reform defections to the Conservatives. Accusations from one candidate that the party is stacked full of racists and bigots, misogynists, whatever else. It's quite interesting. Richard Tice, the chairman of the Reform Party, has come back saying that this is all part of some kind of Conservative stitch-up, suggesting perhaps these candidates that were with Reform weren't really with Reform. Is that what you understand from what Richard Tice has said so far?
That seems to be what he's implying, that these were never really Reform candidates in the first place. But I saw one journalist point out perhaps a quite stark error in that. It's that if the Conservatives were going to set up people to be fake candidates, why then did they pull out only now and not before the ballots were printed? I mean, there is one seat, it's Gavin Williamson's seat, who was, of course, previously the Defence Secretary. He managed to do a deal with his Reform candidate before the ballot papers were printed. So he's one of the only Conservatives where there actually isn't a Reform ballot box there, so probably now one of the safest seats. I mean, if this was all a set-up from the start, why wouldn't they all have done that and taken the Reform option off the ballot paper?
That's a fair point, but what about the allegation that that these candidates may have been offered something, offered a job or something from the Conservatives, a little bit of a deal on the side? Because it does seem odd to pull out at this stage.
That seems more plausible.
I don't know. There's always two sides to every story, and the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, isn't it?
And I do think that we, of course, had huge scepticism when Natalie Elphicke defected from the Conservatives to the Labour Party. What was she offered? Well, it could be quite possible that things have been hinted at or offered in some of these Reform defections to the Conservatives, although it must also be said that this was an ethnic minority woman candidate who defected after a story appeared in the Times yesterday, or this morning's Times, published last night, which pointed to a Reform candidate saying some pretty deeply misogynistic things, talking about J.K. Rowling using very, very disturbing language, and many women, Julia Hartley-Brewer as well, just had a lot of bile to say, so perhaps that did spur this defection. Maybe.
Richard Tice has come out on Twitter. It'll be interesting to see what Nigel Farage has to say about all of this, particularly after that Channel 4 undercover investigation that was revealed on air. But we're also going to be hearing from the Prime Minister very shortly, in the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to be back very soon indeed.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
We've been talking about the White House is concerned with playing down concerns about the health of President Biden, who's apparently taken to freezing during public events. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was seen herding the president back into a photo with world leaders after he shuffled aimlessly away from the group. In the last few days, videos and images of the president freezing at a fundraising event went viral, but the White House stated that they were deceptively edited cheap fakes. With me now, again, is my panel, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop and the associate comment editor of The Telegraph, Mutaz Ahmed. Mutaz, I mean, you are a journalist. What about this idea that in some way the images could be fake?
They could be fake, and some of them will be fake, but the reason these AI images or AI videos or weirdly edited videos are a problem for the White House is that people have seen enough of Biden freezing in real life.
It's not going away, this one. It's perception versus reality, but as Mustafa said, it doesn't matter because it's now become Biden's reality, which is bushfighting these questions about his ability connected to his age. I don't understand where you go from here. He's got a vice president who isn't presidential material, who I think polls worse than he does, despite these, you would call them ageist. In many ways, it's about his competence, isn't it?
It can make a big difference when the president whose competence, mental competence, is under question, is running on the matter of competence itself. They're trying to paint Trump as being incompetent, as being not presidential, as being unable to lead, while they have a candidate who struggles to get off the stage. That's the issue for them. And it's not really about age. He's not much older than Trump, as you say. It's about the appearance of age.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed for getting in touch about postal votes. It seems quite a few of you were planning to use a postal vote. Sandro says, I'm currently working remotely from Portugal for 2 weeks. I requested for my postal vote to be sent to my parents' house, where I currently am. Unfortunately, it only arrived in the post on Friday. Given it needs to be back in the UK by Thursday evening, it's highly unlikely my vote will be back in time.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so maybe you've been stitched up a bit there.
Goodness. Well, David says that postal votes for disabled people, only others vote in person with ID. Why not? Surely safer. Well, I suppose there is an argument there, because we do have quite a liberal system of postal voting. Literally anyone can request it for any reason, and there's no sort of check to that. Other countries are more restrictive with who they give postal votes to.
Yes, I mean, I was just looking at a little map, if I just consult my little map here, of the countries. We are one of very few countries that allow postal votes for any reason. There are some that allow for specific reasons, if you have to meet certain conditions, or if you're in another country for a period of time. But yes, it's only us and a few other European countries and North America that allow it for anything. Is that the right thing? Is that the right thing?
Well, of course, it's Francis says our postal ballot forms came weeks ago and are safely posted back. It was hard enough to decide, but I'm hoping I voted wisely.
Well, this is the thing. I personally think you should have to sit through the whole campaign before you vote.
Yeah,
unless you have specific, a reason to post a vote.
I mean, if, for example, the 2017 election had been 2 weeks earlier, perhaps Theresa May would have won a majority.
It could change a lot.
Yeah.
A lot changes in a week in politics. A lot changes. But Anne says, I applied for my postal vote on the 31st of May, received it on the 21st of June, posted it on 24th of June. Bob's your uncle, and you're from East Yorkshire. So there you go. It worked well for Anne.
And Bob's your uncle, a political saying.
Is it?
The Marquis of Salisbury, Robert Cecil, who was the uncle of a later Prime Minister. And therefore, Bob's your uncle.
Oh, well, there you go.
Piece of cake.
Very interesting to know. Anyway, in royal news, King Charles has begun the annual Holyrood Week residence at the Palace of Holyrood House. He'll be accompanied by Queen Camilla, and the pair will undertake 2 days of royal engagements for the celebration of Scottish culture, history and achievement.
And earlier today, as is tradition, the stay commenced with the ceremony of the keys.
Well, let's cross over to Edinburgh now and speak with GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, what is the ceremony of the keys and what else is planned for these 2 days?
Good afternoon, Emily. Well, it's the ancient ceremony where the King is welcomed to his most ancient and hereditary kingdom of Scotland, and that's exactly what happens this afternoon, with a little bit of a twist. It is the traditional royal week where the monarch traditionally spends a week in Edinburgh in the Palace of Holyrood House, but it's being shortened slightly this year because of the general election, and of course the King needs to be back in London in time for Friday to appoint the Prime Minister, whoever that may be. But it was in the beautiful gardens of Holyrood House this year. Usually it happens in the forecourt behind me. I'm told that's due to logistical reasons, but the military families and the special guests who were invited to watch the ceremony were treated to pipes, drums and bugles of the 2nd Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland. A mix of music, some sea shanties was in there, some musical theatre as well, perhaps reflecting King Charles's love of music. But when the King arrives, the royal standard was raised above the Palace of Holyrood House, and the national anthem was played, as perhaps you would expect. And then the Lord Provost, that is the ceremonial leader of Edinburgh, officially welcomes the King to the city of Edinburgh. He's been the Lord Provost, Councillor Robert Aldridge, for a couple of years now, and he's been telling me how poignant it is being able to do the final ceremony of Queen Elizabeth II back in 2022 and taking on the role under King Charles.
Absolutely, yes. I was very fortunate to be able to conduct a ceremony of the keys with the late Queen Elizabeth II. So I have managed to conduct a ceremony of the keys with herself, also with King Charles. But we also have a second ceremony of the keys when the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland is on, with the High Commissioner. And this year the High Commissioner was Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh. So I've had a real treat to see so many people. It's an incredible honour and privilege to be in the role at such an important historic time. But you know, I always pinch myself about how fortunate I've been. So it is great, and it was wonderful to be able to conduct a ceremony with the late Queen.
Well, following the Lord Provost's official welcome, the King told him, "I return these keys being perfectly convinced that they cannot be placed in better hands than those of the Lord Provost and councillors of my good city of Edinburgh." Very traditional, very ancient words there from His Majesty the King. Later on today, he's going to be holding an investiture for Scottish people who are receiving honours. The Queen is holding a literary reception inside the palace as well, and then they'll all be hosting a garden party, and unfortunately the heavens have just opened, so I fear there may be a bit of a washout, like when Prince William hosted a garden party at Buckingham Palace back in May with some of the younger royals. But it was beautiful for the ceremony of the keys. I can assure you I did not get too wet for that. Tomorrow, Prince William is going to be here in Edinburgh, joining his father, the King, and the Queen, and Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and other members of the royal family to attend this thistle service at St Giles Cathedral. There's also going to be a event welcoming or celebrating the 900th anniversary of the city of Edinburgh. So lots of royal events happening, packed into these 2 days, as I say, because of the general election. Two notable absences though. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, she was also meant to clearly be in Scotland for Royal Week, but due to her continued recovery from that horse-related injury in Gloucestershire, she is not going to be in Edinburgh. Yesterday she apologised and said she was deeply saddened she could not be in Canada to commemorate some World War I events there in Newfoundland, I believe it was. Elsewhere, the Princess of Wales, she is not going to be coming up to Scotland as we understand it. She's not joining Prince William there because of her, of course, ongoing preventative chemotherapy.
Well, Cameron Walker, thank you very much, live from Edinburgh, for giving us that royal roundup.
Yes, indeed. Well, coming up, a rabbi has been harassed outside a mosque after being invited to speak there. We'll show you the shocking footage and speak to an imam after your headlines with Ray.
Cheers, guys. 12:33 top stories. Sir Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes are unable to be counted due to delays with Royal Mail. The Postal Affairs Minister is said to be urgently investigating delays to the delivery of those postal ballots. Kevin Hollinrake is understood to be in direct contact with Royal Mail after the government acknowledged that there were issues with the printing and delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. Well, a candidate for Reform UK has suspended her campaign and defected to the Conservatives. Georgie David said she's frustrated and dismayed by the party and accused the, quote, vast majority of candidates of being, quote, racist and misogynistic. A Reform UK spokesperson said the party strongly disagrees with what they called sweeping comments about more than 600 candidates who are standing with the party. The PM is making a final pitch to voters today, urging wavering Tories to stick with his party and prevent a Labour supermajority. On this, the penultimate day of the election campaign, he's been reminding voters that Labour can be denied that majority if just 130,000 people switch their vote. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he could, quote, get on with the change we need. The Lib Dem leader is urging voters to help him topple Conservative seats like dominoes. Sir Ed Davey is highlighting his party's plan to create a clean water authority, which would have new powers to prevent sewage dumping. And Hurricane Beryl is strengthening into a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm as it moves across the eastern Caribbean. At least one person was killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage across entire islands yesterday. It's now moving on towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surge. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's a fairly good chance you'll see a bit of sunshine around today, albeit with a few showers around and some wetter weather on the way as we go through later today and into tomorrow in association with a system that is currently to the northwest of the UK. But for the time being, yes, there are some bright sunny spells around, particularly towards more western parts. In the east, some thicker cloud, a few outbreaks of drizzly rain continuing, but most of that will clear away towards the southeast. Otherwise, a few showers here and there, many of us avoiding them, although towards the northwest of the UK it is going to be a bit wetter. Where we see any sunshine, it should feel relatively warm, temperatures getting into the high teens, possibly low 20s. Bit disappointing for the time of year. As we go through into the evening, we are going to see northern areas turning increasingly cloudy because of that system that's going to push its way in. Showery rain will become a bit more widespread and there could be some heavier bursts, particularly across parts of Scotland and northwestern parts of Northern Ireland, and that will gradually make its way south and eastwards. So as we go through the evening across much of England and Wales, it's actually looking mostly fine. A few showers around, but there should be some late sunshine around too. However, overnight, that thicker cloud across northern parts is going to push its way southwards, and the outbreaks of showery rain, which could be on the heavy side at times, pushing southwards too. That being said, far southern parts staying dry through most of the night, turning cloudier and a bit wetter perhaps as we head towards dawn. Because of the unsettled weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much, generally staying well above 10 Celsius, most places holding up in double figures. As we go through tomorrow then, a wet start for many of us. Some of the heavier rain will clear away towards the east as we go through the morning, staying pretty cloudy through much of the day for many places, with further rain coming in from the west, but there may be something a bit brighter but also showery pushing into far northwestern parts later on. Temperatures going to be similar to today, feeling a little disappointing for the time of year.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Cumbria. Firstly, the westbound A66 from the Barras turn-off through towards Church Bruffett. The A685 is closed and queuing. There's been a collision there. Now to Taysborough in Norfolk, the Ipswich Road, the northbound A140, that's shut between the Norwich turn-off and Newton Flopman, and closed there at the scene of a collision. Cambridgeshire breakdown eastbound A14 to before Fen Ditton Junction 34. Lane 1's combed off, it's looking slow. Lincolnshire, the A15 between Welton Cliff and Ingham. Now that is closed both ways and queuing at the scene of a 3-vehicle collision there. If you're heading towards Winnerworth in Derbyshire, the Derby Road, the A61, that's shut between Hornbeam Drive and Mill Lane and queuing. Once again, that is due to an accident. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 12. Now, Jewish community representatives have condemned the treatment of a rabbi at a mosque that he'd been invited to speak at.
Yes, Conservative candidate Rabbi Arnold Saunders was filmed and shouted at by a man attending the mosque who was called a snake by the pro-Palestine supporter who asked him to condemn Israel's actions in Gaza.
Well, Rabbi Saunders says that he is feeling fine after the incident and did not feel threatened.
Well, Imam and Director at the Oxford Islamic Information Centre, Dr Sheikh Ramzi, joins us now. Dr Sheikh, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. This story is pretty horrifying, really, that this man was invited to speak at this local mosque and essentially was hounded out.
Yes. Firstly, I would like to apologize, give my apology to the Rabbi Saunders, because I believe I give my apology from the community, Muslim community, because not all are the same. I know the rabbi. I met him some time ago, as I'm some of the director of the interface for the international interface sometime. However, I would like to say, when a person, especially when the Rabbi Saunders went to the mosque and invited to the mosque, he has 4 kind of respect should people have for him. First, he's a candidate for the parliament. That's a respectable things which you have to respect. The second one is a rabbi, is a leader of his people, his Jewish people. He has to be respected. The third one, he's in the mosque, the place of worship, the place of peace. He has been totally respected. And of course, the last one is he's a guest of the mosque, should be respected. I don't understand why this person done that. However, this person does not represent an opinion of the Muslim in this country. We are Muslim, Christian, and Jew. We are totally brother, and always said we are brothers, and we have to solve our differences, solve our friendship, especially in the countries which is a multi-faith, multicultural, and we do many interfaith working interface to going to the mosque, going to the church, going to the synagogue, going to the Godrova, going to the many places. We are all together to bring a peace. And this person done very wrong, very bad to our rabbi. Again, Rabbi, I apologize. I'm so sorry. You're welcome to our mosque anytime you want.
Yes, it is so, I suppose, disappointing to see, because this could have been a moment to bring communities together. The interfaith sort of project of people speaking respectfully, understanding one another, and then just this berration happens, and it undermines the whole purpose.
He come as a friend. He come as a friend, as a brother, I come into the mosque, which I would have thought, if our Prophet, peace be upon him, was there, if he was there, he would have been very angry with this person, because anyone, Muslim, non-Muslim, LGBTs, whatever you want to call it, the atheists, all are welcome to come to visit the mosque, to look at the mosque. If they want to do prayer for themselves, they can do the prayer. The mosque is place of peace, and it should not be.
And the problem is these types of events, Jewish people will see this story in the press, they'll see it, and they'll worry that this issue of Gaza is, making Jewish people a target.
It's the division. We should integrate, not bring a division. But I would like I would like not to be division between this country or Muslim, Christian, Jews, all, and again, all religion brothers, and we are under one umbrella. However, I would like to ask our rabbi, of course, I'm a leader, the same as the rabbi, the leader of the religion to other religion, if he forgive, because he's a rabbi, if he forgive that person, he will find a lot of friends than the division. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. Thank you. They will have to leave it there because we're short on time. But thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sheikh Ramzi. You're from the Oxford Islamic Information Centre.
Well, here are the general election candidates for Bury South, where, of course, that rabbi is standing. Jeff Armstrong is the Reform UK candidate. Seema Ashraf is the Workers' Party of Britain candidate. Michael Elston is standing as an independent. Stephen Morris for the English Democrats. Andrew Page for the Liberal Democrats. Dan Ross for the Communist Party of Britain. Arnie Saunders for the Conservative and Unionist Party. Christian Wakeford for the Labour Party. And Michael Welton for the Green Party.
Well, lots of choices there. Now, in other news, sporting news, Andy Murray will not play the men's singles at Wimbledon today, having been battling to recover from a back surgery.
Well, the two-time former champion had been battling to recover from that back surgery last weekend, but has run out of time with his first-round clash, which had been scheduled for this afternoon.
Yes, he has, however, committed to competing in the doubles competition still with his brother, Jamie.
Well, let's cross now to Wimbledon for the very latest with GB News reporter Charlie Peters. Because, Charlie, there must be a lot of people disappointed today.
That's right, Tom. 11 Britons will be competing today at Wimbledon, but Andy Murray will not be among them. The 37-year-old was set to take to centre court at 6:30 this afternoon to play against Thomas Markle from the Czech Republic in his first round match at Wimbledon. Now, Andy Murray ended a 77-year wait for a British man to win Wimbledon in 2013. The next wait was just 3 years. He won it again in 2016, and he's announced that this year will be the end of his singles career, and he wanted to have some sort of closure at Wimbledon, where so much of his success has come. 11 finals across all Grand Slams in all major competitions. But it isn't going to be the case because, as you've said, 10 days after he had a cyst removed from his back in surgery in order to deal with a spinal injury there that was causing some pressure on the nerve in his right leg, he hasn't quite recovered in time. He said on Sunday that the area where the surgery took place on his back wasn't sore, but he didn't have sufficient feeling in his right leg to play today. Yesterday he was in practice playing against UK #1 Carl Edmund. He was leading across 2 sets in that practice, but was unable to meet the fitness requirements today to kick off that first round match. Now, in a statement, Andy Murray's team has said that unfortunately, despite working incredibly hard on his recovery since his operation just over a week ago, Andy has taken the very difficult decision not to play the singles this year. They went on to say that, as you can imagine, he is extremely disappointed, but has confirmed that he will be playing in the doubles with Jamie and looks forward to competing at Wimbledon for the last time. Now, Andy Murray, his career has been plagued with injury since his last Grand Slam win in 2016. Since 2017, he had a full hip replacement, and since then, he has not reached the second week of a Grand Slam. It will not be the fairy tale ending to his Wimbledon career.
Well, we wish him luck for the doubles. But yes, very sad to hear that he won't be taking part in the men's singles. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters there outside Wimbledon for us.
Now, coming up, we're going to be hearing from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, as a second reform candidate defects to the Conservatives. Don't go anywhere.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Question is... should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artefacts are from around the world, stolen actually. I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artefacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of world heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge, because the British state's willing to do that. Is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artefacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else, because we're a very, we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world, which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always have the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 1. Now, the Prime Minister has been campaigning in Oxfordshire, speaking to the press. He addressed news that a Reform candidate defected to the Conservatives today. Let's listen in.
I've addressed these issues in the past, but what I would say is that what these candidates who are coming over to Conservatives know is that a vote for reform is just a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10. And if you want your taxes cut, if you want your pension protected, and if you want our border secure, the only way to deliver that is to vote for Conservative candidates.
It's quite a specific criticism, though. She is saying that Reform candidates are racist. Do you agree with that characterisation?
Well, we've seen some appalling comments that have been made that I addressed last week, and you know what we have seen is candidates and campaigners openly espousing racist and misogynistic views, seemingly without challenge, and that tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party overall. That's questions for Nigel Farage. But on Thursday, there's a clear choice for people, and if you want your taxes cut, if you want your pension protected, and you want our borders secure, and you want to vote to prevent a Labour supermajority, the only way to do that is to vote Conservative, and that's the very strong message that these candidates and others are making clear.
There are some real concerns that some people aren't going to be able to vote because their postal votes aren't getting through in time. How worried about that are you, and what can be done to solve it?
Well, it's right that the Royal Mail have said that they will look at any concerns where they're raised, because obviously we want to make sure everyone can vote, because this is an important election, and in spite of what some people want others to believe, that it's all a foregone conclusion, every vote matters. And every vote matters, particularly if you want to prevent a Labour supermajority, you want your taxes cut and your pension protected. The only way to do that is to vote Conservative.
Let me ask you about that. You started this campaign on the front foot, talking about policy, trying to get out there and sell a vision to the country. You're ending it warning about a historically high Labour majority. This has been a disaster for the Conservatives, hasn't it?
No, we've got a very clear agenda that I want to deliver in government, and that starts with cutting everyone's taxes at every stage in their life. But I also want to make sure we invest more in our national security. I want to make sure we get to net zero in a sensible way, and crucially, I want to continue to make progress cutting migration and stopping the boats. And that's a choice for everyone at this election. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate is a vote not for those things. I don't want to see people's taxes go up. I want to cut them. I want to want to see our borders secure, not become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to illegal migration, as Keir Starmer would have us be. I want to invest more in our national security. Keir Starmer would cut that. And I want to protect people's pensions. Whereas under Labour, pensioners would face a retirement tax for the first time in our country's history. So that's why Thursday is so important. A vote for the Conservatives is a vote to prevent a Labour supermajority, but it is also a vote to have your taxes cut, the borders that we have secure, and to have your pension protected.
Do you accept the criticism from your candidates, not from me, but from some of your candidates, that this campaign has not gone well?
I've been out with our candidates every day, and that's why I'm fighting hard for every vote. And I was up at 4 this morning talking to workers, because we've got days left to make the case to the British people that Thursday's vote really matters for them, and it will have consequences. And I don't want people to sleepwalk into something that they then regret. A vote for the Conservatives is a clear vote to have your taxes cut, to have our borders secure, to have your pension protected, and to prevent a Labour supermajority. And that's what I want everyone to focus on over the next couple of days.
Well, there we go. Rishi Sunak being asked about those comments, the defections from Reform to his party.
Yeah, stopping short of saying he thinks the majority of Reform candidates are racist, but saying some of them have said racist things. Well, we'll be dissecting that more in the next hour. We'll also be speaking to Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. So don't go anywhere. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. We are going to see some fairly wet weather pushing its way southwards across many parts as we go through the rest of today and overnight. That's due to a system that's currently just to the northwest of the UK. For the time being, though, as we go through the end of today, there is still some dry and at times sunny weather across parts of England and Wales, with a few showers to watch out for. But further north of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, turning increasingly cloudy and also very wet. That rain and cloud is going to push its way southwards as we go through the night, and because of the unsettled weather, it is going to stay pretty mild, temperatures generally staying in double figures. So a fairly wet start to the day for many of us, but some of the heavier rain is going to quite quickly clear away towards the east. If we take a closer look, and across some southern parts by 7-8 o'clock, apart from a bit of rain across East Anglia perhaps, there should be some dry, perhaps even brighter weather for a time. Different story further north, outbreaks of rain and quite a lot of cloud for many places, with something a little bit more persistent pushing into parts of Scotland and also Northern Ireland as we go through the morning. And this band of something a bit more persistent is then going to gradually make its way eastwards as we go through the day. So staying pretty soggy for Scotland and Northern Ireland, England and Wales. Some further outbreaks of rain don't look as heavy as what we'll have seen earlier on, but it is going to stay generally pretty cloudy. Temperatures are still going to be a little bit below average for the time of year. We may just about scrape into the low 20s Celsius, but because of the cloud and the wet weather, and for some of us blustery winds, it's going to feel a little disappointing. Later on, as we go through tomorrow evening, there will be some brighter skies developing across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a scattering of showers mixed in with these, and then some clear spells spreading to many parts. On Thursday, we can expect some blustery and wet weather in the north. On Friday, it's looking wetter for more of us. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
The mystery surrounding the disappearance of flight MH370 has perplexed the planet now for 10 years. But now all of a sudden researchers at Cardiff University have piped up and said, oh, we heard a beep. Aerospace engineer, founder of MH370search.com is Richard Godfrey. Richard, are we going to find this thing?
The new research is much more thorough and gone in much more detail. It is picking up acoustic waves under the water. It's not conclusive, but it's a good step forward.
Is this a cover-up job of epic proportions? Do you think something quite sinister happened to this plane? Because it is all very odd.
I think you're right. It is all very odd. It is. We have a lot of data, but we don't have the final analysis, and we won't until we actually find the wreckage. The Indian Ocean is a huge place, 77 million square kilometers. When we find the plane, we can recover the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder. We can learn a lot more.
Do you think someone might have shot it down?
No, the plane flew until it ran out of fuel. The plane was perfectly in working order. There was an active pilot right until the end. So my only theory at the moment is the captain of the plane actually committed a hijack of his own plane. But until we find it, we won't be able to prove that.
We are potentially a step closer now to knowing and to one of the greatest mysteries of recent times anyway, finally being solved. There's aerospace engineer there, Richard Godfrey. Thank you.
Britain's election channel, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Now, the government is urgently investigating severe delays to postal vote delivery. The Royal Mail says ballot packs are being delivered as soon as they arrive, but thousands fear they won't get there in time. We'll have all the details.
And another Reform UK bombshell as a second candidate defects to the Conservatives, accusing fellow candidates of being racist and misogynistic.
And the Labour leader says he'll clock off at 6 o'clock on Fridays if he wins the election. Will he be a part-time Prime Minister, or is he right to protect family time? We're hosting that debate.
And the end of an era for one of our greatest ever sports stars. Former Wimbledon and Olympic champion Andy Murray has pulled out of this year's single tournament due to his injury at this, his last Wimbledon. Now, of course, Emily's back after what was a pretty special 4 days away from work. What did you get up to?
Oh, I just got married, you know.
Oh, casual.
Just casual wedding.
And of course, people have been asking, can we see a photograph? So we've dug this up. Here are Emily and Patrick, the king and queen of GB News, strolling down the aisle there.
There we go. Now, what you don't know, I'll give you a little bit of an insight into this. So it was raining and all overcast at the start of the day. When I was getting ready, I was feeling a little bit disappointed that the weather had changed. But then, Tom, what happened?
Literally, as soon as you because there was sort of a bush at the back of this lovely sort of little garden where you came from behind the bush and appeared for the first time in your wedding dress. And precisely at that moment, the clouds part, the sun shines through just as you walk down the aisle. I mean, I don't know which sort of Dubai-based weather company you got to move the clouds, but clearly it worked.
Oh yeah, it was all us. We were praying. Of course we were. And I will give you, I won't, this is a bit mean to Patrick, but he was a blubbering mess at the end of the aisle. No, not too bad. But yes, I should say thank you to the wonderful guys at Mickey Photography who made those lovely photos. But that's enough of that.
Yes, there's politics to be done. We're talking about postal votes today. There's, of course, delays to some of these postal votes in 90 constituencies. Are you affected? Do get in touch, gbnews.com/your say.
But let's get the headlines with Ray.
Very nearly 3 minutes past one, your top stories. So Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes can't be counted due to Royal Mail delays. Comes after the Postal Affairs Minister was said to be urgently investigating issues with the delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. Kevin Hollinrake is understood to be in direct contact with Royal Mail and has visited depots. Sir Keir says every vote must be counted.
Well, look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
A candidate for Reform UK has suspended her campaign and defected to the Conservatives. Georgie David says she's frustrated and dismayed by the party and accused the vast majority of candidates of being, quote, racist and misogynistic. She's the second Reform candidate to defect to the Tories in 2 days. A spokesperson for Reform said the party strongly disagrees with what they called sweeping comments about more than 600 candidates who are standing with the party. Well, the PM is making a final pitch to voters today, urging wavering Tories to stick with his party and prevent a Labour supermajority. He was up bright and early this morning, meeting warehouse workers in Bedfordshire. He toured an Ocado facility and enjoyed a cup of tea in the staff canteen. Then, on this, the penultimate day of the election campaign, he spoke to workers in Oxfordshire, where he said Labour can be denied that majority if just 130,000 people switch their vote.
If we give Labour that blank cheque, you won't be able to get it back. And all of you are going to end up paying much more in taxes. And I don't want to see that happen, right? So when you think about voting on Thursday, you know, if you vote Conservative, it is a vote for lower taxes, because I believe you all work incredibly hard. And I want you to enjoy the benefits of that hard work and keep more of your money for yourselves to spend on what you want and to spend on your families.
Well, Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he could get on with the change we need. Keir says two of his key priorities include reforming the planning system and improving the economy. The leader of the Lib Dems is urging voters to help him topple Tory seats like dominoes. Sred Davey is highlighting his party's plan to create a clean water authority, which would have new powers to prevent sewage dumping. They also want to ban bonuses for water bosses until discharges and leaks stop and turn water suppliers into public benefit companies. Well, the Green Party says it will abolish Ofsted to reduce stresses in schools and improve well-being if they win the general election. The party is also pledging to scrap tuition fees and provide free school meals for all kids. Meanwhile, continuous assessments would replace SATs. Co-leader Carla Denyer described their education package as an A-star offering. Hurricane Beryl is strengthening into a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm as it moves across the eastern Caribbean. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in this year's hurricane season. Scientists say the rapid pace of its approach is likely due in part to the effects of climate change. At least one person was killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage across entire islands yesterday. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surge. Staying with international news, and police in Kenya have fired tear gas at protesters following a week of deadly clashes there. People could be seen hurling stones at riot police as clouds of tear gas wafted through downtown Nairobi. The demonstrations began in response to the government's plans to introduce new taxes, which have since been abandoned. Kenya has come under immense pressure from lenders to cut its debt, but there's also growing fury among voters over the soaring cost of living. And Russia says it can't comment on a proposal by Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine because it doesn't know what it involves. The former president said during last week's debate that if he wins the US election, he'd have the war settled before he took office, though he offered no details of how. The Kremlin has previously said that any peace plan would need to reflect what it calls the reality on the ground. Ukraine says President Putin's proposal amounts to a demand for its surrender. Right, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 1. A lot going on today, but our top story this hour. With less than 48 hours now to go before Brits go to the polls, the government is conducting an urgent investigation into these postal vote delays.
It comes as the Postal Affairs Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, hits out at the Royal Mail for failing to deal with a huge surge in demand. The Royal Mail has hit back at the government, saying there's no backlog in their system.
So who's right? Joining us now is Christopher Hope from the Labour battle bus. Christopher, these postal votes, I was reading that what they call the Association of Electoral Administration, they estimate that 20 to 25% of people are planning to postal vote or have done or so already. This could have quite the impact.
That's right, Tom and Emily. Yeah, you join me now in Derbyshire. We're waiting for another Keir Starmer event to happen. I've been with the Labour battle bus all day, and that's right. Postal votes are really a common way now for many of us to vote. 1 in 5 typically vote by postal ballot, and the course concerns from all across the board, from the SNP, the Conservatives, Kevin Hollinrake, the SNP, Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader for that party, and now Sir Keir Starmer's waded in. They're all worried about the impact of lost postal ballots that don't get to the right people on time, and people can't take part in this huge election that's happening on Thursday. Earlier, I asked Sir Keir Starmer what his concerns were, and here's what he had to say. Keir Starmer, a quick question. If some postal votes aren't counted because they're delayed by the Royal Mail, should there be recounts in some seats on Thursday?
Well, look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
Sir Keir Starmer talking to GB News there, saying that we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That is holding out the option, I think, clearly he's saying, in fact, of having maybe some recounts of votes. If there's a pile of postal ballots that have been returned, that have been delivered to the right people. Big concerns here, I think, amongst all the parties about the impact of these problems with the Royal Mail. The Royal Mail, by the way, have said these concerns are overblown and they don't recognise them in the same way. But there's no question, I think, this could be an issue going beyond the counting day for this election on Friday.
Many people, particularly elderly people, will be relying on postal votes. This country, of course, has a high proportion of people who use them, but disproportionately, perhaps, at least apart from maybe some seats, disproportionately older people, more conservative-leaning people do use postal votes. This could have a disproportionate impact on the Conservative Party.
It could do, Tom. I haven't seen any actual, and it'd be quite good to see the research on that. I haven't seen any research yet to show which age group, which demographic, which party supporters are more likely to use postal votes. But yeah, I think it's a concern across the board, and certainly, given there are, say, 100 seats, according to the MRP polling, which suggests they can go either way with a few hundred ballots cast either way, this could be a real democratic issue of ensuring that we get the right election result come polling day, and I think that's the concern.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed. Christopher Hope, you're with the Labour battle bus in the East Midlands.
Now, in response to this story, Royal Mail has said we'll be carrying out sweeps at our mail centres and delivery offices to ensure that all postal votes in the network are identified and returned to the relevant local authority before the close of poll stations.
Yes, they go on to say we will also have additional people on the ground in our mail centres on Thursday evening, identifying and pulling postal votes for delivery to local authorities. Seems the Royal Mail are trying to put out the message that this is going to be OK. There's not too much going wrong, but the fact that there's having to be an urgent investigation into this, I wonder.
Yeah, well, I suppose they do need to project calm, collected authority, even if it might not be that entirely behind the scenes.
Well, joining us from the Tory battle bus is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, the Conservatives must be pleased with these defections from the Reform Party.
Yes, indeed. A little bit of good news for Rishi Sunak, of course, when Nigel Farage came out and said that he was going to stand for reform. That was in some ways their worst nightmare, wasn't it? Because it led to a big spike in the reform vote. But twice now in 2 days, we've seen reform candidates basically going over to the Conservatives. So today it's Georgie David who is standing in West Ham and Beckton, and they have said that although they have no doubt that the party senior leadership is not racist, says however the vast majority of candidates are indeed misogynistic and bigoted. So quite a blistering attack. Of course, Richard Tice, who was the leader until Nigel Farage swept in, is absolutely appalled by this as more desperate by the Tories. But yes, certainly, this is good news. Nigel Farage has had a rocky week or so, hasn't he, after the comments about the West having provoked Putin and Ukraine also, you know, and now we have this, of course, and also the court on camera comments at the end of last week. So Rishi Sunak, despite the polls,
Catherine, I think your feed is just a little bit too juddery. Let's catch up with Catherine a little bit later on. We'll have to read out the candidate list, actually, for West Ham and Beckton, as it was mentioned. We have Emily Bigland from the Liberal Democrats, Louise Austin, Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, Holly Alice Ramsey, Conservatives, Georgie David, Reform UK, James Edward Asser, Labour Party, Rob Callender, Green Party,
Sophie Nakwivi, the New Independence Party, Coyote Shidowo, the Christian People's Alliance. There we go.
I think that was all right. That was all right. We should say that Richard Tice, the chairman of the Reform Party, has been doing quite a little work on social media, at least, to try and push back against these defections, saying that this is all part of some kind of Conservative plot. So it'll be interesting to see what Nigel Farage has to say about all this too. I don't believe he's put anything out yet on the matter.
I wouldn't be surprised if, of course, if there's a defection, it's not going to be entirely of the candidate's own volition. There'll have been conversations, there will have been discussions between people within the Conservative Party and the person who is doing the defection. So, of course, those conversations will have taken place. The allegation from Richard Tice is that perhaps there were offers of jobs or something else in the mix.
Or even that this was all planned before. Isn't he even suggesting that?
Yes, there is a suggestion that that this person was never a Reform Party supporter and was a plant the whole way. But I find that very hard to believe, just for the simple reason that if you were going to pull a trick like that, why would you wait until after lots of people have voted by post? Why would you wait until just 2 days before the election to then do the defection? Because there is a case where a Reform candidate defected just hours before the deadline to get on the ballot paper, and therefore, in one particular constituency, there is no Reform candidate, which I suppose if you were going to allege a set-up, that would be the situation that would be the most advantageous to set up.
Does your head hurt like mine? It's all getting a little bit complicated, isn't it? But there's lots of talk of a hung parliament, at least from Rishi Sunak. Seems he's almost campaigning for one now. So joining us now is Martin Baxter, who is the CEO of Electoral Calculus. Now, Electoral Calculus, I understand, have provided some recent figures on the election. Can you explain what you've found?
Sure, we had a little look. So just to put it in context, remember there's about 46 million people in the country who are eligible to vote, and we expect about 31 million of them probably will vote on Thursday or have voted by post. And we looked at the slightly hypothetical question is, if exactly the right number of people change their minds, what would it take to get a hung parliament? And you could do that if just 1% of the voters, about 345,000 people, changed their minds. That's essentially Labour supporters switched at the last minute to Conservative or another party to stop Labour from winning that seat. So you could, in theory, get a hung parliament with a small number of people changing their vote.
But
on the
Martin,
other hand,
I suppose that in order for that to work, you'd have to pick a certain number of constituencies where those 345,000 people live and have no people changing their vote at all in any other constituencies, and only the switching happening in those constituencies to just get it over the line. So perhaps a bit hypothetical.
Very hypothetical, yes. A more realistic number, suppose you want to know how many people have to change their minds for the Conservatives to get more votes than the Labour Party. That is a much bigger number. That is 3 million voters. So that's about 10% of the turnout. Of the turnout. So that gives probably a fairer idea of how many people would have to change their minds for this election to be radically different.
And how many people, I guess this is hard to say, but perhaps you have some information on this. How many people make up their minds this close to the election? How many people will decide, have not decided yet, essentially?
That's a great question. I think probably my guess is not very many, because we asked people, do you know how you're going to vote yet? And most people say yes. There are some, maybe 5 or 10% who haven't decided. And of those, maybe some of those people aren't going to vote anyway. If they can't decide already after 5 weeks of going on with this campaign between the parties, then maybe they don't like any of them and they're not going to vote. But I'm sure there will be some people who vote at the last minute and other people who see the ballot paper at the last minute and decide to vote for Count Binface or somebody like that. So that, last minute choices is in everybody's right to do, but I think the campaign has been going on for a while. So sort of the boring answer to the question, I think, is that the people who are interested have already made up their minds, and the people who aren't interested aren't interested.
Now, of course, Martin, there is some variation across the pollsters. People are talking about the Labour Party perhaps winning a Tony Blair-scale victory, and right up to the other end of the Labour Party winning just about every seat in the House of Commons. Now, I suppose the truth might be somewhere in between those two, but I suppose there is no pollster saying really that a hung parliament is on the cards at this stage.
That's right. You captured it well, Tom, but you have essentially said that the choice between a very, very large landslide and a very, very, very large landslide. So in fact, the polls are relatively consistent on that point. The polls are suggesting a Labour victory, and a Labour victory on quite an impressive scale. So that at the moment is what it looks like. Though for that not to happen, there would have to be quite a big polling error and probably some late swing. But on the subject of late swing, I do notice today there's 3 polls have come in, all 3 separate polls, with a Labour lead down to 15%, whereas it used to be 20%. So there is a bit of late swing. So if that were to continue over the last few days and there were to be polling error, then things could be a bit more open. But at the
Martin,
moment...
Is that narrowing to a 15-point lead because the Tories are up or because Labour is down?
I'm just having a look at the figures now. It is the Conservatives being up, actually. Conservatives are up and Reform are down middle. So the Conservative lead over Reform has widened out to checking 9%. And if you remember, a week or so ago, they were almost level pegging in some polls. So that, Nigel Farage's party not doing quite as well as it was doing a few days ago. So there is some movement in the campaign. It's been a fairly static campaign so far for the 5.5 weeks, which is slightly boring for people like us. But there is a bit of movement now at the end, so who knows what's going to happen eventually.
That is interesting.
Very interesting.
That moves it, I suppose, from a Conservative wipeout scenario to more close to a 1997 scenario.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Martin Baxter. Really great to get your expertise on all this, CEO of Electoral Calculus. Yeah, I wonder, he did reasonably well, Rishi Sunak, in that debate. Here, perhaps the narrative has got a little bit clearer from the Conservative side.
He's taken the gloves off when it comes to the Reform Party as well. That remarkable interview where he spoke about being described with a racial slur and used the racial slur himself. Perhaps that cut through.
Maybe. Well, coming up, we'll be debating Keir Starmer's claim that if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll be clocking off at 6 o'clock on Fridays. Well, what do you make of that? We'll have the debate.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Criminal barrister Tony Wyatt. Tony, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so talk to me. What have you been up to since we last spoke?
More writing and pulling my hair out.
I want
the
to get
state
your,
of our courts.
I want to get your view on a few things, and seeing as you're a barrister, Rishi Sunak's come up with his Rwanda plan, everyone sort of poo-pooing that, and Keir Starmer's come out with his border command. Is it something that may well stop traffickers from trafficking people across the channel?
The border command is essentially just another police force, isn't it, to just be dealing with immigration. I fail to see how it's new. I'm not entirely sure how it's new. We have that already. We have a border force. We live in a world where if you say there is a problem with this level of illegal immigration, you're immediately branded right-wing. I'm not right-wing. I'm nothing of the sort. But I can recognise a problem when I see it. That's a problem. That's too many people coming here illegally, undocumented, lost into a system. That's not a good thing. That can't possibly be a good thing. If Keir Starmer is going to throw a lot more people at it, then yeah, that's a good thing. But it's hardly an innovation, is it? Immigration courts in this country have been absolutely crucified. They've been savagely cut. Where you may have dealt with 100 cases in a week before, you're now dealing with 10 because you don't have the judges, you don't have the barristers, you don't have the solicitors.
Same.
I mean, it's if you decimate the system by which these applications are processed, well, then you're going to create a circumstance in which the applications build up and build up and build up.
That's why we have a backlog.
Exactly. At the moment, the CPS estimates that we have about 75,000 cases in the Crown Court. The government would say 70, the CPS would say about 75. I'd say they'd know better, given they're prosecuting them all. They would say about 75,000 in the Crown Court, the backlog. That's up from 39,000 in 2020. Now, that's just the Crown Court. If the same thing is happening in the immigration courts, how are we ever recovering from that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. It's 25 minutes past 1, and lots of you have been getting in touch with your views.
Yes, particularly on this postal vote scandal, because Steve says any postal votes marked for a defector should still be counted for the original party and give them the option to provide a replacement candidate in the event of a win. Although I think that rather misunderstands what these defectors have actually done, because they will still be listed on the ballot paper. The ballot papers have already been printed. Defecting now, it's too late. There's still going to be a Reform candidate there on that ballot paper for whom people can vote, whether by post or in person. Now, of course, if that individual is elected, they could then defect and say, well, I'm actually
They just say I'm this colour now.
Yes.
OK, so once they're in, if they are elected, they will then be of the party that they've defected to. But for now, you will still vote for the candidate in their original party.
Same. Yeah.
Gosh, lots of defections. Danny says no one should be allowed a postal vote unless they're severely disabled. Lots of people share that view. Danny. It does seem strange that we do it differently than most other countries in the world.
It's more restricted in Australia, New Zealand, and lots of other. Although Canada, America, Germany, Poland, they have basically the same system as us.
Well, so if you're in the country, how difficult is it just to go down to the ballot box? I mean, they're pretty close by, aren't they?
Yes. I mean, I suppose, the argument is if people are on holiday, if people have a last
But that's allowed in some countries. If you're out of the country and you're abroad, then fair enough. Anyway, keep your views coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Perhaps I'm too old-fashioned and that postal votes are the way forward. Perhaps even online voting should be how we do things.
Never, 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 never.
Never, 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 says Tom. OK, question for you. Is Sir Keir Starmer a part-timer? The Labour leader has been criticised for admitting that he will not do a work-related thing or event after 6 o'clock on Fridays.
Well, he says he reserves his Friday evenings to spend time with his wife and his 2 children. But the Conservative camp are accusing Sir Keir Starmer of wanting to work a 4-day week and clock off early.
That's perhaps a bit of a stretch, because he did say 6 o'clock on Fridays, so to most people that might be a working week or what's considered it. But would you want a Prime Minister that clocks off at 6 o'clock? Political commentator Reem Ibrahim says Sir Keir Starmer sounds incredibly privileged, while author and journalist Rebecca Reid says a work-life balance is a good thing. Good stuff. Reem, so you agree that Sir Keir Starmer is looking like a part-time MP? Part-time politician?
He is, and I tell you what, I do think a work-life balance is really important. I think it's fantastic to want to spend time with your wife and your children. But effectively, I think what Keir Starmer was saying on this radio show is he was trying to come across as though he has that kind of work-life balance, like he is a regular person. But actually, the reality is, for a lot of people, they do want to spend time with their families, but they're not able to due to work commitments. You'd expect the same of the Prime Minister. And effectively, I think it's quite insulting for somebody to sit there and say effectively that they're going to spend more time with their family and they're better for it. But actually, there are so many people, so many hardworking people in this country that would absolutely love to spend more time with their children and their loved ones, and effectively they don't have the time to do that. My question is, what will this actually look like in reality? If Joe Biden calls at 8 p.m, will Starmer just refuse to take the call? What does this actually look like?
Well, perhaps that's a question we can throw to Rebecca Reid.
Well, I'm somebody who actually has a child, and I also have boundaries about when I will work, and I have never missed bedtime, apart from on rare occasions where I've been by pre-arrangement away on holiday. But for the entirety of our life, I'm home at 7 p.m. to do bedtime, because there is nothing more important and there is no career more important to me. And I think we've had a Prime Minister who has very widely spoken about his very intense work schedule and not sleeping very much, and he hasn't done a stunning job. So I'm thinking maybe it's time to give a go to a guy who might be in bed by 9 o'clock on a Friday and get a good night's sleep.
Well, of course, that's subjective. But Reem Ibrahim, surely, even a Prime Minister needs a little bit of downtime. Keir Starmer did justify this by saying that you don't always make the best decisions when you have absolutely no work-life balance.
I'm not saying that Prime Ministers shouldn't have a work-life balance. I think it's fantastic for everybody to try and have a work-life balance. My issue with this in particular is he's effectively trying to portray himself as somebody who is a family man that is a much better person than anybody else because he's prioritising time for his family. But actually, the real problem with what he said is that he would unequivocally, come what may, I think is exactly what he said, not work after 6 p.m. on a Friday. And I think that we just cannot have that inflexibility for somebody that's going to have access to the nuclear launch codes, for somebody that is effectively going to be leading this country and leading the West in many ways against some of the most politically tumultuous times globally. We need to ensure that there are those people that are going to be more flexible with that. And I think it's not true in reality. Of course, Starmer will have to think about work after 6 p.m. because he would be Prime Minister by the end of this week.
Rebecca Reid, is that not perhaps an issue that we should take with what was said? Being Prime Minister is not like any other job, and perhaps trying to carve out specific, defined time at a time when your enemies around the world know that you won't be at your desk paying attention. I mean, it's just giving them a free shot, isn't it?
No, I think if anything, it's a power move. Like Winston Churchill famously had an afternoon nap, and that was his time to recharge. It's perfectly reasonable and sensible to find your own rhythms in the way that you work best. And honestly, I think it'd be quite impressive if Biden rings and says, I want to talk to you, and they're like, sorry, Keir's with his kids. I think that says, no, we don't just jump when you say how high. We find the way. I think if the balloon goes up, I do think if Putin says I'm on my way, he might be like, kids, we're going to watch Frozen later. But generally speaking, I think it's really strong and powerful to know what you need to do a good job.
This is a very serious discussion, but Rebecca, you do always make me laugh. Thank you so much to you both. Sorry, it was short and sweet. Rebecca Reid and Reem Ibrahim. Good stuff. I think frankly, it's unrealistic. And also, I don't imagine Sir Keir Starmer wouldn't rearrange matters if something serious came up. But it's worth discussing. It's worth discussing because he did say, come what may, Fridays after 6 o'clock, that is family time.
Yeah, goodness me. Well, stay with us because very shortly we'll be speaking to Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
32 minutes past 1, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. So Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes are unable to be counted due to delays with Royal Mail. The Postal Affairs Minister is said to be urgently investigating. Kevin Hollinrake is in direct contact with the company after the government acknowledged issues with the printing and delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. A candidate for Reform UK has suspended her campaign and defected to the Conservatives. Georgie David said she's frustrated and dismayed by the party and accused the, quote, vast majority of candidates of being racist and misogynistic. A Reform UK spokesperson said the party strongly disagrees with what they called sweeping comments about more than 600 candidates who are standing for them. PM is making a final pitch to voters today, urging wavering Tories to stick with his party and prevent a Labour supermajority. On this, the penultimate day of the election campaign, he's reminding voters that Labour can be denied that majority if, he says, just 130,000 people switch their vote. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he could get on with the change we need. Lib Dem leader is urging voters to help him topple Conservative seats like dominoes. Sir Ed Davey is highlighting his party's plan to create a clean water authority, which would have new powers to prevent sewage dumping. Hurricane Beryl is strengthening into a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm as it moves across the eastern Caribbean. At least one person was killed as that storm inflicted large-scale damage across entire islands yesterday. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surge. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's get an update on the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2646 and €1.1799. Price of gold, £1,136.53. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,136 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's a fairly good chance you'll see a bit of sunshine around today, albeit with a few showers around and some wetter weather on the way as we go through later today and into tomorrow in association with a system that is currently to the northwest of the UK. But for the time being, yes, there are some bright sunny spells around, particularly towards more western parts. In the east, some thicker cloud, a few outbreaks of drizzly rain continuing, but most of that will clear away towards the southeast. Otherwise, a few showers here and there, many of us avoiding them, although towards the northwest of the UK it is going to be a bit wetter. Where we see any sunshine, it should feel relatively warm, temperatures getting into the high teens, possibly low 20s. Bit disappointing for the time of year. As we go through into the evening, we are going to see northern areas turning increasingly cloudy because of that system that's going to push its way in. Showery rain will become a bit more widespread and there could be some heavier bursts, particularly across parts of Scotland and northwestern parts of Northern Ireland, and that will gradually make its way south and eastwards. So as we go through the evening across much of England and Wales, it's actually looking mostly fine. A few showers around, but there should be some late sunshine around too. However, overnight, that thicker cloud across northern parts is going to push its way southwards, and the outbreaks of showery rain, which could be on the heavy side at times, pushing southwards too. That being said, far southern parts staying dry through most of the night, turning cloudier and a bit wetter perhaps as we head towards dawn. Because of the unsettled weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much, generally staying well above 10 Celsius, most places holding up in double figures. As we go through tomorrow then, a wet start for many of us. Some of the heavier rain will clear away towards the east as we go through the morning, staying pretty cloudy through much of the day for many places, with further rain coming in from the west, but there may be something a bit brighter but also showery pushing into far northwestern parts later on. Temperatures going to be similar to today, feeling a little disappointing for the time of year.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules. Buckley looking slow westbound for the M62 just towards Simister Island at junction 18. There was a vehicle having a tyre change. That's all been dealt with, all lanes open, but still seeing delays. Lincolnshire, issues for the A15 now between Welton Cliff and the Ingham turn off. The A15 closed both ways for investigation were causing delays. Anti-clock Dartford Tunnel M25, the left-hand tunnel is closed off, queuing back towards junction 1B at the scene of a collision. Now in Barrow Green in Kent, the Sevenoaks Road, the A25 between the Rootham turn-off and the Garden Centre in items closed and queuing. There's a car fire there. And Penzance in Cornwall, the westbound A30 blocked between Polmere Road and the Haymore roundabout in queuing. That's due to a breakdown there. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 1, and lots of you have been getting in touch with your views, especially on postal voting.
Yes, you have. Now, Clive has got in touch. He says the postal ballot rage. Sounds to me that if Labour don't get the results they want, it'll be like the referendum. We need to have another vote. The people didn't know what they were doing. I guess you're referring to the idea that, well, what Sir Keir Starmer said, that there may have to be recounts.
Yeah.
If some of these postal votes don't get through.
Although I think I have a hunch that this will affect more Conservative voters than Labour voters.
Do you think?
I think it does skew older voters. Now, there are some communities where there is also postal voting, but I think that's a small number of constituencies that it leans Labour, and in many, I think the average postal voter is probably older and therefore is more likely to be a Conservative voter.
Maybe. Let us know. Although a lot of people abroad can be younger and they vote with the postal votes. Anyway, Mark says it's a bit late to investigate postal delays with just over a day to go. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It is a bit late, isn't it? If you haven't got it by now, will it be, it won't get there in time?
Although, if it arrives on the day, you can take your postal ballot to your local polling station and you can vote physically with it. You don't have to post your postal ballot.
That's no good if you're out of the country.
No, it isn't. It doesn't help in that case. But you can get a proxy vote. You can get an emergency proxy vote.
Can you do that any time?
If you're out of the country, you can get that any time. You can do that on the day. It's a bit of work, bit of time. As long as you have someone trusted there, preferably a family member, you can proxy vote in an emergency.
It's like when you lose your passport and you have to go for an emergency meeting, emergency appointment. I've had to do that once. Anyway, in sporting news, Andy Murray will not play the singles at Wimbledon today. He's been battling to recover from back surgery.
Well, the two-time former champion had been battling to recover from that back surgery last weekend, but has run out of time now with his first round clash, which had been scheduled for this afternoon.
Yes, he won't be taking part. He has, however, committed to competing in the doubles competition with his brother, Jamie.
Well, let's cross to Wimbledon now and get the very latest with our reporter, Charlie Peters, because, Charlie, this must have been a disappointment for many fans in attendance today.
Yes, good afternoon, sports fans. Well, there are 11 Brits in action today, but Andy Murray will not be among them. He was due to play against Thomas Markle of the Czech Republic at 6:30 on centre court, but he's withdrawn this morning. As you said, 10 days after that back surgery he had due to a cyst on his spinal cord, which was putting pressure on the nerve in his right leg. Now, on Sunday, his team said that there was no sensitivity around where the surgery took place, but he hadn't fully recovered the feeling in his right leg. He was playing against Carl Edmund, the British #1, yesterday in some practice warm-ups. Withdrew from that after a couple of sets, but this morning he's out of the competition. He will not be competing in the singles. Very disappointing news. And in a statement, Andy Murray's team said, unfortunately, despite working incredibly hard on his recovery since his operation just over a week ago, Andy has taken the very difficult decision not to play the singles this year. As you can imagine, he is extremely disappointed, but has confirmed that he will be playing in the doubles with Jamie and looks forward to competing at Wimbledon for the last time. Well, earlier this afternoon, I caught up with some tennis fans to get their reaction to that news.
Not surprised given the press recently, but yeah, sad because it's his last tournament, isn't last Wimbledon apparently, so yes, very sad.
We're really disappointed, yes. It would have been lovely to see him in the singles.
I like Andy Murray. I don't know that he's. I just came to see him playing. So he's not playing today.
It's a shame. We thought we'd be here for a swan song, but we're not. But we'll cheer on Jack Draper anyway.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but at least we've got another Brit to cheer on in the third game on, so that's all good for us.
Well, Andy Murray broke a 77-year drought without a British men's champion in the singles at Wimbledon in 2013 when he defeated Novak Djokovic. The next wait was just 3 years when he won again in 2016. But since 2017, he has been plagued with injuries, a hip replacement, and he hasn't made the second round of a Grand Slam since. But hopefully, on Thursday, playing alongside his brother for the first and last time in the doubles, we may see a happy ending to Andy Murray's Wimbledon career.
Well,
let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters there outside Wimbledon. I'd be very disappointed if I was hoping to see Andy Murray and then he pulled out. Interesting that he's going to do the doubles anyway.
Yes, I wonder if that just gives him a bit more time to recover.
Yes. Well, new dash cam footage has shown military horses on the loose through central London yesterday. Again.
Yes, the video from a taxi driver in Pimlico catches 2 horses from the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment after they were spooked by a bus.
Yes, this is now the second such incident in just 3 months that's involved army animals breaking loose in the capital. Is this somehow on the rise? Let's speak to equestrian Amelia Palmer to get her thoughts on this. Amelia, now, the second time this has happened in 3 months, it seems rather bizarre to those who don't understand such matters. What do you think's happening here?
I think in London, you've got to imagine being a horse. You've got a prey animal. Horses have obviously eyes just on the sides of their heads. There can be so many different factors. You think you've got a bus, you've got rubble, which is disrupting kind of the exercise that they normally do. Some horses are more anxious than others. A lot of the time, they'll be bringing in new horses into regiments. And sometimes it can be completely random. I mean, I've had horses in the past that will spook an ominous leaf or a menacing dustbin. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is something that people should be worried about, seeing these animals on the roads. But yeah, it's bizarre that it's happening, but I think the Army have definitely got the right riders and the right people involved in selecting these horses, that it's a safe environment for people to be in still.
So if it is perhaps inevitable that we will see incidents like this, we know cities are incredibly busy, lots of things that are unexpected going on, cars honking their horns and building work and buses and all the rest of it. Do we need to start having a conversation about whether horses should be allowed in busy urban environments?
I think that's a conversation that has gone on for many years. I think the Household Cavalry are very aware of the risks that these horses are exposed to. I think it's possibly educating the London public. The British Horse Society does a lot of really important work in making sure the general public is aware of what you should be doing around horses. And I think that obviously it's very bizarre that these horses are in Pimlico. I was watching the footage and I used to live quite near there, so I was surprised to see them there. But I think people just do need to be a bit more aware. It's kind of being calm, being quiet. Obviously, people are afraid of horses, right? But if you flap and you get in their way, that then causes a lot more problems. Obviously, traffic can't really help it, but just slowing down, stopping, being 5 minutes late to wherever you're going is a lot better for you than having a horse go through your windscreen, trust me.
Yes, it's quite incredible seeing that footage of, as you say, such a central location in London, not where you expect to see horses just galloping freely down the road. Can you explain just a little bit about what it's like to see a horse get spooked? Because I'm not an equestrian, I don't horse ride, so I don't really know what you're looking for or what exactly happens. Is it a sort of twitch and then they can suddenly react? What exactly happens?
It can be exactly that. It can be something as small as a twitch. More often than not, horses are incredibly rational animals. And I know from that video where he's just jumped in front of a taxi or a bus, it does not prove my point at all. But they're normally very good. Quite often, if a horse is about to spook, you'll feel it underneath you. And speaking to the equestrians more than the non-equestrians, you'll feel it. And horses get more stressed when there isn't somebody on their back. Imagine it's a bit like having a blanket on your bed. You've got that reassuring weight. You've got something that you know is there. Suddenly, if you lose that and you lose kind of the person that's giving you all of these controls and signals of where to go, how quickly to go, that can be incredibly stressful for them. So it doesn't help in that instance that I think the public doesn't necessarily know what to do. But yeah, it can be incredibly stressful for them. You've got your main source of kind of your provider that's suddenly nowhere near you. And you've just got so many external triggers and different things going on around you. It's difficult for them, definitely.
We were just looking at images of those two household cavalry horses that had bolted, and one, of course, with the blood down its front. I mean, really distressing images, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story, apart from, of course, the imagery of it, was the fact that these horses are now healthy. One of them, indeed, was back on parade only last week.
Yeah, it's a real tribute, I think, to the army in general, and also to the nature of horses. They're very amenable, they're very willing, and you can put a horse out that's had a traumatic experience and you can say to it, right, we'll give you a couple of weeks off, a couple of months off, and they are willing to go and do that again. And again, going back to the army, it's a real testament to the fact that they go through such a rigorous selection process, not only with their riders, but also with their horses. If you look at all of the horses that the Queen's had in the past and that the King now has, they're all selected for the traits that you want in a good army horse. It's trainable nature, amenable, good temperament. But the army does so much good work and they have the best vets in the UK. And if you look at what they get up to in the summer, they're on the beach, they're having a great time. They're not just in this city environment, and that's really important, I think.
Not only the best veterans, but also the best vets. Well, Amelia Palmer, equestrian, thank you very much for joining us and talking through those stories.
Yes, very interesting indeed to get that perspective from someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yes.
I can only guess what it's like, really, to look after a horse.
Well, still to come, we'll be speaking to Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. We'll also be discussing England's superstar Jude Bellingham, whether he could be facing a disciplinary action. More on that very shortly.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I've got a grade 3 astrocytoma brain tumour. Once I was diagnosed, I tried to do my claim with my insurance company and was rejected. They then also cancelled my life insurance and also cancelled my wife's policies as well.
And this is Zurich Insurance, John.
This is Zurich,
and their point was, because you'd had some dizzy spells, which you hadn't told them about, they say dizzy spells equates to a brain tumour, which there's no evidence to support that.
I was with King's College Hospital. They ignored them. King's College Hospital were the experts.
And you were expecting £25,000?
Yeah, that was a critical illness claim.
Critical illness, because you've got a critical illness. Clearly, it couldn't be more critical, could it?
No.
Michelle, you've got a lovely, poorly husband, and you're also worrying about paying the bills and what the future holds.
Yeah.
What impact is this having on you on a day-to-day basis?
I try not to think too much about the future because it does upset me. I'm kind of thinking, when John does go, I'm left with a mortgage to pay and 2 young children.
How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Right.
So it's incredibly tough.
And are you working?
I haven't worked since having the children.
Right.
And that's a decision we made when we had children.
In the grand scheme of things, this amount of money is a drop in the ocean for a company like Zurich.
Yeah, because I think they could make all this go away.
I've read some of the statement. Zurich said, "We're sorry to hear of the very difficult circumstances Mr. Rendler's family are experiencing." You're terminally ill, and they're calling that difficult circumstances.
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes to 2. Now, here's an interesting poll that has just come out just in the last few minutes. It's for The Sun, done by JLP Partners, very respected polling firm, of 16 and 17-year-olds. And get this, Labour's in first, as you'd expect, but the Reform Party is in second on 23%. Now, that's a bit higher than the normal average, but when you break it down by gender, it is extraordinary. Amongst 16 and 17-year-old males, Reform is on first place, joint, with 35%. Although amongst females, that drops down to 12%.
This is so interesting. Now, we've talked a little bit on this show about the social media effect, that Reform videos and TikToks and whatever else are being seen by young people most than any other party. And clearly, they're appealing to to teenage boys.
Teenage boys.
Teenage boys are getting behind Reform.
First place amongst teenage boys. But teenage girls, they're in third place. So they average out in second place. But they're third place with teenage girls, and the Green Party is in second place. There is a growing gender gap, particularly amongst younger Brits.
This is absolutely fascinating. Very interested to get your views on this. Why do you think the boys versus the girls is so different when it comes for support for Reform? Lots of people always think young people are socialists, don't they?
Well, of course, the Labour Party is saying give votes to 16 and 17-year-olds. Maybe it's the Reform parties that's going to start saying this.
Well, very interesting indeed. Let us know your thoughts on that one. I'll be very interested to see what people say about this, what the different, why they think there's this gender divide among our teens.
And Conservatives amongst female 16 and 17-year-olds, 0%, according to this poll.
0%?
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Much more on that after this.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We are going to see some fairly wet weather pushing its way southwards across many parts as we go through the rest of today and overnight. That's due to a system that's currently just to the northwest of the UK. For the time being, though, as we go through the end of today, there is still some dry and at times sunny weather across parts of England and Wales, with a few showers to watch out for. But further north of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, turning increasingly cloudy and also very wet. That rain and cloud is going to push its way southwards as we go through the night, and because of the unsettled weather, it is going to stay pretty mild, temperatures generally staying in double figures. So a fairly wet start to the day for many of us, but some of the heavier rain is going to quite quickly clear away towards the east. If we take a closer look, and across some southern parts by 7-8 o'clock, apart from a bit of rain across East Anglia perhaps, there should be some dry, perhaps even brighter weather for a time. Different story further north, outbreaks of rain and quite a lot of cloud for many places, with something a little bit more persistent pushing into parts of Scotland and also Northern Ireland as we go through the morning. And this band of something a bit more persistent is then going to gradually make its way eastwards as we go through the day. So staying pretty soggy for Scotland and Northern Ireland, England and Wales. Some further outbreaks of rain don't look as heavy as what we'll have seen earlier on, but it is going to stay generally pretty cloudy. Temperatures are still going to be a little bit below average for the the time of year. We may just about scrape into the low 20s Celsius, but because of the cloud and the wet weather and for some of us blustery winds, it's going to feel a little disappointing. Later on, as we go through tomorrow evening, there will be some brighter skies developing across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a scattering of showers mixed in with these, and then some clear spells spreading to many parts. On Thursday, we can expect some blustery and wet weather in the north. On Friday, it's looking wetter for more of us. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking? Really? Seriously? It's not a wind up, is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God! This is amazing!
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this. That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you!
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tormini.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The government is urgently investigating severe delays to postal vote delivery. The Royal Mail says ballot packs are being delivered as soon as they arrive, but thousands fear they won't get there in time. We'll have all the details.
And another Reform UK bombshell as a second candidate defects to the Tories, accusing fellow candidates of being racist and misogynistic. The Reform chairman has hit back.
The Labour leader says he'll clock off at 6 o'clock on Fridays if he wins the election. But will he be a part-time Prime Minister, or is he right to protect his family time?
And an end of an era for one of our greatest ever sports stars. Former Wimbledon and Olympic champion Andy Murray has pulled out of this year's singles tournament due to injury at this, his last Wimbledon. Now, votes for for 16 and 17-year-olds, this is one of Labour's flagship policies if they win the election. But some curious polling out.
Yes, new polling by JLP Partners. Now, the guy that runs JLP used to run polling for Downing Street, so they're serious players here. They've polled 16 and 17-year-olds, and the results might surprise you. The Labour Party is in first place, but only on 39%. Second place is the Reform Party on 23%. Now, that all doesn't look too out of kilter until you break it down by age. When you break it down by sex, by gender, males have Reform in first place, joint first place on 35%, although amongst female 16 and 17-year-olds, that drops down to 12%.
It's so interesting, that gender divide. I find it very interesting because lots of people have been talking about this, how girls are going more liberal, progressive, and boys are going more small c conservative. Is this what's happening here? Is this, you know, support for reform, UK, from these youngsters? Is that what we're seeing?
Well,
boys going more right-wing, girls going more left-wing?
We've seen it in the United States, where not so much amongst millennials, but amongst Generation Z, people who were born around the turn of the millennium, the young males tend to be more and more right-wing. And we've seen this again in European elections. The parties that have, of the radical right, I mean, the National Rally in France or Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, they tend to be getting votes, not just from older people, as perhaps is the stereotype here, but younger voters are being more radical in their voting patterns. So what might the Labour Party be unleashing if we get votes at 16?
I've got some theories about why there might be this gender divide, but I might save them for a little bit later.
Ooh, I'm interested
I want
to
to
hear.
think it through properly, because I don't want to go ahead and, you know, insult half of the population by suggesting why it might be. But let us know your theories as to why there's so much support among 16 and 17-year-old boys, especially for the Reform Party. gbnews.com/your say. But let's get the headlines with Ray.
Thanks, guys. 3 minutes past 2, our top stories. 3 Leicestershire police officers are under investigation for potential misconduct over how they dealt with triple killer Valdo Calacane. 2 constables and a sergeant made inquiries into alleged assaults by Calacane on 2 colleagues at an industrial estate in Leicester. He then went on to kill students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, along with caretaker Ian Coates. Sir Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes can't be counted due to Royal Mail delays. It comes after the Postal Affairs Minister was said to be urgently investigating issues with the delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. Kevin Hollinrake is understood to have visited depots. Sir Keir says every vote must be counted.
Well, look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
A candidate for Reform UK has suspended her campaign and defected to the Tories. Georgie David says she's frustrated and dismayed by the party and accused the, quote, vast majority of candidates of being, quote, racist and misogynistic. A Reform UK spokesperson said the party strongly disagrees with what they called sweeping comments about more than 600 candidates who are standing for them. Ms David is the second Reform candidate to defect to the Tories in 2 days. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has said that the party hasn't acted quickly enough.
Well, we've seen some appalling comments that have been made that I addressed last week, and you know what we have seen is candidates and campaigners openly espousing racist and misogynistic views, seemingly without challenge, and that tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party overall. That's questions for Nigel Farage. But on Thursday, there's a clear choice for people, and if you want your taxes cut, if you want your pension protected, and you want our borders secure, and you want to vote to prevent a Labour supermajority, the only way to do that is to vote Conservative, and that's the very strong message that these candidates and others are making clear.
Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he could get on with the change we need. Sir Keir says 2 of his key priorities include reforming the planning system and improving the economy. The Lib Dem leader is urging voters to help him topple Conservative seats, he says, like dominoes. Sir Ed Davey is highlighting his party's plan to create a clean water authority, which would have new powers to prevent sewage dumping. They also want to ban bonuses for water bosses until discharges and leaks stop and turn water suppliers into public benefit companies. Some international news, and police in Kenya have fired tear gas at protesters following a week of deadly clashes. People could be seen hurling stones at riot police as clouds of tear gas wafted through downtown Nairobi. The demonstrations began in response to the government's plan to introduce new taxes, which have since been abandoned. Kenya has come under immense pressure from lenders to cut its debt, but there's also growing fury among voters over the soaring cost of living. Russia says it can't comment on a proposal by Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine because it simply doesn't know what it involves. The former president said during last week's debate that if he wins the US election, he'll have the war settled before he takes office, though he's offered no details of how. The Kremlin has previously said that any peace plan would need to reflect what it calls the reality on the ground, whilst Ukraine says President Putin's demands would force it to surrender. Hurricane Beryl is strengthening into a potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm as it moves across the eastern Caribbean. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in this year's hurricane season. Scientists are saying that the rapid pace of its approach is likely due in part to the effects of climate change. At least one person was killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage across entire islands yesterday. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, and we begin this hour with some extraordinary polling that has just been released within the last hour. Joining us now is Christopher Hope from the Labour Battle Bus. And Christopher, the Labour Party want to introduce votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, and today we finally have a bit of understanding about how 16 and 17-year-olds might vote.
Yeah, Tom, hi. Well, I'm here in Derbyshire here at a manufacturing plant with the Sir Keir Starmer battle bus. He's making a speech just as we speak now to workers. But that's right. Extraordinary polling here from JL Partners. They looked at voting intention among 16 and 17-year-olds. That's the group, of course, who can't vote because the voting age is 18 as things stand. Labour want to look at bringing that down to 16, don't they, as in Scotland and other votes we have in this country. They found that 39% of people aged 16 to 17 would vote Labour, and fascinatingly, 23%, a quarter of those, would vote Reform. Reform UK, Nigel Farage. Greens 18%, Lib Dems 19%, the Tories just 5. And that almost, I'm fascinated by two things. I'm maybe not surprised that 4 in 10 young people, mid to late teens, want to vote Labour, but a quarter wanting to vote Reform says to me that what Nigel Farage tells us all the time, that young people are flocking to him through his TikTok messaging, through him appearing, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, is cutting through to the younger base. So if this change does happen, it's quite fascinating who might benefit.
Alone with this trend in this country, we've seen this in the United States, we've seen this in some countries in Europe, this sort of gulf emerging between girls and boys, young women and young men. It's very interesting indeed. The Sun is suggesting that Nigel Farage would actually benefit from this Labour policy of giving votes to teenagers. Perhaps not what they planned.
Yeah. No, and nor is it what you expect. I haven't seen the gender breakdown, Emily, you described there between boys and girls, but you might think that maybe more young boys are attracted to Reform's stronger position on the national flag and patriotism and
Chris,
that kind
can I just interrupt you to bring you that gender breakdown?
I mean,
because it is fascinating The JLP poll finds amongst teenage boys, 16 and 17-year-old boys, reform is in first place. But amongst girls, reform is in third place. Therefore, it averages out in second place. I mean, it is the most extraordinary polling. First place on 35% amongst teenage boys.
Yeah, well, that is extraordinary, and it's exactly what Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, has been telling GB News repeatedly, that he is getting a lot of cut-through with his TikTok videos, a very active and quite an innovative social media profile. That clearly cut through, and I think the new audience he found with that ITV programme, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, is clearly working. I should say the big issue, by the way, away from voting intention for 16 and 17-year-olds at the moment, is postal ballots and who is getting them. Sir Keir Starmer has told me here on the election battle bus for Labour, he thinks there may need to be some recounts in some polls because the people haven't cast their ballot, they haven't got it, or even they haven't been delivered when they've been sent off. Here's what I had to say earlier. Keir Starmer, a quick question. If some postal votes aren't counted because they're delayed by the Royal Mail, should there be recounts in some seats on Thursday?
Well, look, we cross each bridge as we get to it. I am concerned about the delays, and I think what needs to happen now is everybody needs to pull together to make sure the ballot papers get where they're needed so that people can exercise their democratic right to vote. So that's where my focus is at the moment.
There you have Sir Keir Starmer saying that he'll cross that bridge when it comes to it, but there is every chance that dozens of seats could be quite tight seats, and if they find bundles of uncounted postal ballots on Friday or over the weekend, that could be a big issue, a political issue that pushes the actual final result of this election into next week.
Yes, very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope. You are on board the Labour battle bus for us.
Well, we should say what the Royal Mail has said in response to this story. They're going to be carrying out sweeps at Royal Mail centres and delivery offices to ensure that all postal votes in the network are identified and returned to the relevant local authority before the close of polling stations.
They also add, we will also have additional people on the ground in our mail centres on Thursday evening, identifying and pulling postal votes for delivery to local authorities. So there you are, a bit of a keep calm and carry on message from the Royal Mail.
Well, on to some huge sports news now. There are fears that Jude Bellingham could be banned from England's quarter-final game against Switzerland amid a disciplinary investigation into a rude gesture made during Sunday's match against Slovakia.
Yes, UEFA have confirmed they are investigating the 21-year-old midfielder over potential breach of the basic rules of decent conduct. There he is. Could England's superstar really miss out on a chance to bring football home? Well, it's our sports broadcaster, Aidan McGee. Aidan, this is quite an extraordinary story, isn't it, really? Jude, superstar player for us in the England team. He's been scoring the goals, the few of them that we've had. And how serious is this? Is it a real possibility that he could actually be booted out for the rest of the tournament?
In short, no. I don't think we're going to see him banned. This apparatus or this investigative kind of legislature it exists within UEFA because they want to show it as a deterrent to players who maybe want to take things a bit further, maybe want to reveal political messages on their T-shirts, maybe want to even display gestures that could be construed as even ruder than the ones Jude Bellingham displayed on Sunday evening. Now, the reality is that, yes, they'll take their time. It has to go through a framework of scrutiny, if you like. But I think, in reality, England will get a message tomorrow, the FA. They'll get a message from UEFA probably in the next 48 hours that Jude Bellingham will be cleared to play. They can't leave it too long because, clearly, if he is to be banned, then England needs to make a contingency plan tactically and get their training right. That wouldn't be fair to make them wait too long. But I honestly don't think they'll have to wait a very long time to find out that, yes, it'll just be a fine, which will be paid by the player. There'll be an apology issued by the player. In fact, I think he's kind of issued a semi-apology already by saying it wasn't as everybody construed it to be. And I think that realistically will be the end of it. But I think there's no doubt whatsoever that we'll see Jude Bellingham playing for England on Saturday.
Well, what was his excuse again? Sorry, just he did tweet something out, didn't he? What was it?
Yeah, so what would happen is that somebody within the FA will have recognised the issue. Now, I think we can see what it all is. I mean, it looks for all the world as if it was a gesture towards the Slovakia bench, who may have been giving him some issues during the game. He claims it was towards a supporter, but it's very much in the moment, isn't it? I mean, like, this guy's 21 years old. I've said many times before, there is no gig in sport like playing for England. They've not won anything since 1966. And so, yes, you're going to feel the pressure. There are two players there in the picture that we can see who did the damage on the day for England. And I don't feel that there's anything too much to be read into this, but he did release a statement immediately after the game, in fact, just apologising and saying there was no offence meant towards the Slovakia team or their bench, and that it was a private joke. So he doesn't really issue an apology for what he did, but he has attempted at least to explain it away. I think you'll see an apology in full when the matter's cleared up in the next 48 hours, as I say.
Yeah, the words in full. He quote tweets a video of this gesture with a yawning emoji and then a big X emoji saying an inside joke gesture towards some close friends who were at the game. Nothing but respect for how that Slovakia team played tonight. A shaking hands emoji to finish off that tweet. It has to say that quite a few people online haven't taken that at face value, and it became a bit of a meme in and of itself, with people using the same words, nothing but respect for how, and then disrespectful things, and sort of using it as a contrast. Do you think that that's genuinely what happened, or is this a sort of post hoc explanation?
Yeah, I think, look, reading between the lines, you know, if we're taking taking the apology or the semi-apology at face value, I don't think anyone's really doing that. They kind of know what he meant. But also I think, Tom, there's a degree of understanding that this was a hugely pressurised goal. England was seconds from going out. Sometimes you get reactions in the moment. Yes, we can all see what it is, but is it the biggest crime in the world? Is it deserving of a ban in a match?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It all seems a bit much. It all seems a bit much.
But UEFA have to have some kind of disciplinary process in place. What you'll see is a fine. I think that's fair. I really do, because you can't just let players get away with doing whatever they want. But he won't be banned.
Also, he is a massive role model for lots of young men and boys.
Every player is.
It is important to uphold some standards, I guess.
It doesn't do him any harm whatsoever to be reminded of that now and again.
Exactly, Aidan. Another story, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's laughed at for crying after missing a penalty.
Look, I think it was actually quite sad last night. We saw a player who is at the very end of his career. He's taking near enough every free kick on that pitch, even the ones that reveal an impossible angle to score from. And it's a player who's too powerful within that squad. He's playing alongside players who've won the Champions League. And yes, he's an extremely important player in Portuguese football. He's an extremely important person within world football. But he's clearly more powerful than his manager. He's clearly more powerful than his teammates. And everything he was trying last night, it's all very well if you're trying all these things and they're coming off, but they're not. He was given a chance to score from 12 yards in normal time, which would have spared the inconvenience of extra time and penalties, and he still missed. And so they've created this monster themselves. Yes, he's justified. Some would say he's earned the right to do that because he's been a superstar player over the last 20 years, but he's becoming a problem now for Portugal. All's well that ends well. They went to penalties, they went to extra time, or extra time then penalties, I should say. He did earn some kind of redemption by scoring the first penalty.
And yet, Aidan, what the BBC said here, well, they branded him Ministerial Ronaldo. We can see it in the bottom of our screens here. This is a screenshot from the BBC. Is that right to do? Is that appropriate, or are they just having a bit of a laugh?
It's a bit of a laugh, for goodness sake. I mean, like, you know, it's not exactly prominent on the screen. I mean, like, I saw that last night. I didn't even notice it on the bottom left-hand side. But yeah, it's quite funny. And I think that most people could see that some of these free kicks, Tom, were taken by Ronaldo when they should have been taken by the players. He's acting personally and not for the team. That would be my view. If I was managing his team back then, that's what I would say. That's what I'd be saying. That's how I'd be critiquing the situation. But nobody in that squad, in that whole structure of Portuguese football, is powerful enough to challenge him. And that's the problem, because there's one thing getting past Slovenia in the second phase. It's going to be a big problem when the bigger sides work you out later in the rounds.
So do you think it's a bit harsh to say, you know, he needs to man up? Or that's a bit on PC these days. You can't really say that, can you, man up? But, you know, get over it and stop crying. Is that a bit mean?
Well, honestly, I don't think it's necessarily mean, but I just think that it's slightly unedifying. I think that a player of his stature should not be doing that when the game is not done. By all means, save your... I know it's emotional. I know we can't always control when that comes to the surface, or comes boiling to the surface, but that does not need to be done before extra time. And I suppose people will come back to me and say, oh, hang about, what about Paul Gascoigne when he cried Natalia 90? Well, to be fair, he got on with the job and he delivered a performance in extra time, which almost yielded a victory. Cristiano Ronaldo missed a big chance in normal time last night. He was on free kicks and corners, which he shouldn't have been on. And as I say, Paul Gascoigne was a real shining light for England that night. Cristiano Ronaldo was a problem for his team, no question about that.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Aidan McGee, for running us through those two footballing stories. Sports broadcaster, of course.
Yes. Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking with the former Attorney General, Sir Geoffrey Cox, about his party's chances with less than 48 hours now to go to until people go to the polls. Stay with us.
Mark Dolan Tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
As he turns 80 next month, Thomas Markle gives a moving interview to the Mail newspaper saying, "I've never been one for birthdays, but I know the one person I most want to hear from, Meghan, will not be in touch. I'd love to meet my grandchildren," he said, "but I'd be happy with a photograph at this stage." Well, for reaction to this sad story, I'm delighted to welcome US political and royal commentator Hilary Fordwich.
He also added that he never thought that he'd have something in common with the King. And of course, the King doesn't know his grandchildren either. And I think that's a very sad state of affairs. What is very important, the important thread here, though, is the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of Meghan Markle claiming to care about people and all the tours they go on where they have empathy for people, and yet her very own father. And also, Mark, it really happened so fast. In 2016, she posted on Instagram that her daddy was the greatest in the world. And the other thing is that she claimed that she had made everything herself and she came from a very poor family. Actually, she had a very privileged childhood, being sent to private schools in California.
Well, poor old Thomas Markle, as he approaches his 80th birthday, is a serious thorn in the side and, frankly, an ongoing embarrassment to the couple.
Yes, and I think that one of the things that's immensely sad is that, Meghan Markle wasn't happy to be number 2 to Princess Catherine, and now she ends up being really nothing. I do think that a tiger doesn't change its stripes. What we have to look at here is track record. Somebody who's dumped her friends, dumped her own family, dumped her country originally when she came over to the UK, and even her adopted dog. There is a track record there, and Thomas Markle has sadly said it's referred to now as being markled when you're dumped.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's 25 minutes past 2. Let's return now to that news that another Reform candidate has defected to the Conservative Party, saying the majority of candidates for that party are racist.
Well, joining us from the Tory battle bus is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Bring us the latest on this. What's being said by the Conservatives and what's being said by the Reform Party?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, this is the second Reform candidate in 2 days, isn't it, that has gone over saying they don't want anything more to do with the Reform Party. So, of course, this is good news for the Conservatives because It looks likely at the moment that the Reform Party is going to cost the Conservatives dozens of seats in the general election. But Richard Tice, who of course was leader up until Nigel Farage swept in just a few weeks ago, has said that this is more desperate corruption by the Tories. Their implication is that the Tories had sort of put in paper candidates that were always going to go over to them.
Oh, it is constantly the case when we try and connect to these battle buses. Sometimes the connection does fall. But I think it is interesting that we're talking about these Reform Party defections at the moment, because they come after a series of scandals from Reform candidates. And this particular defection today, the candidate was saying she didn't want to be associated with some of the scandalous things that others have said. It's notable that last night the Times reported that there was one Reform Party candidate who'd said a whole host of misogynistic insults. I think we can see a picture of this article up on screen now. A Reform candidate advocated for Nicola Sturgeon to be shot, called J.K. Rowling a wild misogynistic insult starting with a B. And a little bit later in this article, actually, I was surprised to find my own name in the article. It read, in 2021, he used the C word to describe David Attenborough and Tom Harwood, a GB News journalist, who he also said was, and do be aware that some viewers might be offended by these words that were used about me, the Prince of Prickhood.
No comment.
I have to say, when I was told by a friend that, Tom, do you know you're in the Times today? And I'm like, no.
You were like, oh, am I?
I'm in the Times alongside David Attenborough. Oh, I'm sure this will be a very respectful thing that has clearly been written. But no, I was just called a C word by a Reform UK candidate.
I feel like you love it, don't you? You know, it's better to be noticed, I guess, than go unnoticed. Very interesting. I mean, there is a bit of an effort going on, isn't there, to try and find all the things that Reform candidates have said in the past. There is. I think it is fair to point that out. There has been. Since the Reform Party started polling quite well.
Yes, I think there has been an effort, but ultimately, is it illegitimate to point out that actually, and Nigel Farage has said this himself, they had to pick a lot of candidates with very short notice. They will not know a lot about the background of some of these candidates. And of course, they themselves said that they were let down by their vetting company. Now, that's nothing to say about the views of Nigel Farage, that's nothing to say about the views of Richard Tice, but it is to say about the views of some of the Reform UK candidates that they have said some pretty nasty things in the past.
Yes. And I guess Farage, he did say he spent, what, £1.7 million on this vetting company and that they haven't done their job, so he's going to be taking it up with them. But they had that absolutely massive rally, didn't they, on Sunday in Birmingham. I think those are pictures from there with 5,000 people, so clearly a lot of people are still supporting the Reform Party, absolutely.
Yeah, thousands of people and pyrotechnics as well. I mean, it all feels a bit American.
It does, actually,
yeah. Quite Donald Trump.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, we know Nigel Farage and Donald Trump are friends.
They are.
They are, more than just acquaintances. They are friends. But yes, lots and lots out there in the press as people dig into what people have tweeted in the past, what they've said in the past, all of this sort of thing. Let us know what you make of it all. But these defections too, Richard Tice, the chairman of the party, coming out to say... well, essentially, that this is a Conservative plan or conspiracy of one thing or another, but of course he'll need to present some evidence to back up that claim if it's to be believed.
And all of this coming in the context of new polling that says amongst 16 and 17-year-olds, amongst 16 and 17-year-old teenage boys, Reform is joint first place, but amongst girls, much further behind. Really interesting stuff, much more to dissect. But don't go anywhere, because in just a moment we'll be heading to Wimbledon to find out what people think about former champion Andy Murray pulling out of the singles competition. But before all of that, let's get your very latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, guys. It's 2:30, our top stories this hour. 3 Leicestershire police officers are under investigation for potential misconduct over how they dealt with triple killer Valdo Calacane. 2 constables and a sergeant made inquiries into alleged assaults by Calacane on 2 colleagues at an industrial estate in Leicester. A month later, he went on to kill students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, along with caretaker Ian Coates. The chairman of Reform UK, Richard Tice, has accused the Conservatives of placing, quote, Trojan horse candidates to spread lies about the party. Comes after a second Reform candidate suspended her campaign and defected to the Conservatives. Georgie David accused the vast majority of candidates, quote, of being racist and misogynistic. A Reform spokesman described her comments as sweeping and her actions as, quote, sad and strange. Sir Keir Starmer has refused to rule out the need for recounts if some postal votes are unable to be counted due to delays with Royal Mail. It comes after the Postal Affairs Minister was said to be urgently investigating issues with the delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. Kevin Hollinrake is understood to have visited depots. The PM is making a final pitch to voters today, urging wavering Tories to stick with his party and prevent a Labour supermajority. On this, the penultimate day of the election campaign, he's reminding voters that Labour can be denied that majority, quote, if just 130,000 people switch their vote. But Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country. In an interview with The Times, he said he needed a strong mandate so he could get on with the change we need. Right, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's a fairly good chance you'll see a bit of sunshine around today, albeit with a few showers around and some wetter weather on the way as we go through later today and into tomorrow, in association with a system that is currently to the northwest of the UK. But for the time being, yes, there are some bright sunny spells around, particularly towards more western parts. In the east, some thicker cloud, a few outbreaks of drizzly rain continuing, but most of that will clear away towards the southeast. Otherwise, a few showers here and there, many of us avoiding them, although towards the northwest of the UK it is going to be a bit wetter. Where we see any sunshine, it should feel relatively warm, temperatures getting into the high teens, possibly low 20s. Bit disappointing for the time of year. As we go through into the evening, we are going to see northern areas turning increasingly cloudy because of that system that's going to push its way in. Showery rain will become a bit more widespread and there could be some heavier bursts, particularly across parts of Scotland and northwestern parts of Northern Ireland, and that will gradually make its way south and eastwards. So as we go through the evening across much of England and Wales, it's actually looking mostly fine. A few showers around, but there should be some late sunshine around too. However, overnight, that thicker cloud across northern parts is going to push its way southwards, and the outbreaks of showery rain, which could be on the heavy side at times, pushing southwards too. That being said, far southern parts staying dry through most of the night, turning cloudier and a bit wetter perhaps as we head towards dawn. Because of the unsettled weather, temperatures really aren't going to drop much, generally staying well above 10 Celsius, most places holding up in double figures. As we go through tomorrow then, a wet start for many of us. Some of the heavier rain will clear away towards the east as we go through the morning, staying pretty cloudy through much of the day for many places, with further rain coming in from the west, but there may be something a bit brighter but also showery pushing into far northwestern parts later on. Temperatures going to be similar to today, feeling a little disappointing for the time of year.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you again. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Barras in Cumbria, the westbound A66 is down to a single lane and queuing between there and the Kirby Stephen turnoff in Brough as a collision gets recovered, naturally causing delays. Anti-clockwise, the M60 from 14, the East Lancs Road through towards Worsley at 13. Lane 1's combed off, a 5-mile queue back to Prestwich at 17. Takes about half an hour to get through the scene of a collision. A15 in Lincolnshire still closed both ways between Welton Cliff and Ingham, a collision being investigated. Eastbound M4 in Berkshire, Slough and Windsor at 6 to Langley at 5. Lane 1's out for a breakdown causing delays. And the anti-clock Dartford Tunnel, the M25, the left-hand tunnel still closed off. Queuing now back to Dartmouth at Junction 2 whilst the collisions dealt with. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 35 minutes past 2, and we're joined by Conservative Sir Geoffrey Cox. Sir Geoffrey, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show. How concerned are you, and how concerned should we be, the public, about these postal vote delays? It's looking like perhaps thousands of people may not get their vote in.
Well, I think we should be concerned. Certainly, I have had such reports, and I know that many others have, which will mean that other parties will. To some extent, we get them every election, but it does seem slightly more this time, and I think we will need to have a review, an inquiry into it, because plainly what is fundamentally wrong is that people should be deprived of their vote.
Should be an inquiry, especially coming from a former Attorney General. But, Sir Geoffrey, this could potentially affect the Conservative Party more than other parties. We know that the Conservative vote tends to be older people, and more older people are more likely to have a postal vote.
Well, we'll have to see. I don't think necessarily there's been a huge increase in the number of postal votes being demanded, which I think is one of the issues. We will just have to see if there are well-documented and attested examples of really quite a lot of people not being able to vote. That, of course, could conceivably affect outcomes, which it would be catastrophic, really, for outcomes to be in jeopardy if significant numbers haven't arrived. But I don't think we're in that position at the moment. I think to some extent in many cases in elections we do get these reports. I think what we'll need to do is review it, and I understand the Election Commission is saying that is what it will do.
And would you support recounts in the case of marginal seats if there is a view that perhaps some postal votes have gone uncounted? Or would you support? Keir Starmer seems to suggest that he would.
Well, I don't think there'd be recounts. I think the returning officer will have to deliver an outcome. If he doesn't have ballot papers, he's got to count what's in front of him. What could happen, I suppose, but I think we're a very, very long way from it, is election petitions to overturn the outcome of an election. That would, as I say, be catastrophic. I hope the problem isn't that serious.
Our fingers crossed. But on to the substance of the issues of this campaign now, because we have heard from Sir Keir Starmer that he would want to protect time on Friday evenings after 6 o'clock to not be doing work as Prime Minister, to spend time as his family. Of course, Rishi Sunak today has been saying that being Prime Minister is a full-time job. Is that a bit unfair to Sir Keir Starmer, who, after all, says that perhaps he'll perform better if he has some time off?
Well, I think this story is a little bit of campaign froth. You get them in every campaign. To some extent, the Lib Dem leader is specialising in campaign froth with his stunts. And I think this is not really a serious story. I think what the real question is, if there is any real question in this, is why Keir Starmer has said it, because he knows perfectly well that you can't knock off at 6 o'clock as Prime Minister. You couldn't even do that on a Friday as Attorney General. The question is, why did Keir Starmer, knowing perfectly well that it can't be the case, why did he say it? And I rather suspect that it's the same with most things that Keir says, which is that it was to please the audience he had in front of him at the time.
Well, your party has leapt on this, haven't they? Just a bit, calling him Sir Sleepy, saying that he's a bit weary and all this. Is that a bit unfair in your view? It sounds as though you might think it is.
Well, I just don't think this is a really serious story. I think it may well raise some questions, as I've said, about why on earth the Leader of the Opposition thinks that a Prime Minister can carve out regularly time at 6 o'clock on a Friday. I mean, Putin, Xi and others won't wait until won't be kind enough to wait to do it before 6 on a Friday if they're going to pull any action. So I think the reality is he knew perfectly well it wasn't so. And I rather suspect we'll find that he does, if he's elected, work on Fridays, just as I did as Attorney General.
Now, of course, something else the Prime Minister has been saying is that a hung Parliament is within reach. It seems that, to some extent, the Conservative Party has rather conceded that it can't win a majority, and the best it could possibly hope for is the one outcome it campaigned most to avoid last time around. I'm old enough to remember when Boris Johnson went to the country saying hung parliaments don't work, give me a majority. Why on earth is Rishi Sunak now saying, let's have a hung parliament, please?
I think the point the Prime Minister is making is that in around about 100 or so seats, a very small number of electors will make the difference, around 130,000. And we can still stop any Labour majority if 130,000 people decide to put their cross by the Conservative box. And the reason for doing that is that this campaign run by the Labour Party, its mask slipped the other day. Keir Starmer defined working people, the people that he would seek to protect from tax rises, as those with savings, or those without savings. Now, that means we know what's going to happen. If you've saved a few pennies, or if you've looked after your retirement, or if you want to leave something to your children that you've worked hard for, Labour is coming for you. And the worry is that we are sleepwalking into a one-party state with a vast majority, and the Labour Party will have not told us what they're going to do, and we will wake up to something we really don't like. And that is the message the Prime Minister is saying to those 130,000 people who could make all the difference, whose pens are poised over the Reform box or the Liberal Democrat box. Vote Conservative, because by voting Conservative you will prevent a Labour supermajority.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Sir Geoffrey Cox, Conservative, of course. Thank you very much indeed.
Now to some shocking news. The 6 times winner of England's best-kept village has pulled out of the competition because of the smell of raw sewage coming from the river that has become unbearable.
Yes, this caught our eye this morning. Chalfont St Giles in Buckinghamshire has had to withdraw after experiencing raw sewage being dumped into the River Misbourne since January.
Well, let's speak now with Parish Councillor from Chalfont St Giles, Robert Gill. Robert, this is a pretty shocking story. No longer the best-kept village.
I know, it's appalling. We had to pull out of this year, and this year was quite a special year for us because we were going to be able to go into the Cup Winners' Cup. So, yeah, apart from not even being able to enter, we'll lose the chance of winning that award as well, which is pretty harsh on all the parishioners in the village.
And I read from reports today, you've given a quote to the Telegraph, I'm sure among others, about how gutted you are and that this is all to do with the Thames water. That's who you're blaming.
Indeed. Upstream of where we are, there is a large balancing tank where a lot of sewerage is collected from a variety of different parts of the villages upstream of us. That has been used since January as a means of overflowing the sewer into the river, and you know this sewage has been running down from there from sort of January time in a completely sort of uncontrolled manner. I'm probably unfair to say, but it's certainly been running into the river and running down. And as you can see from the pictures there, we have now got sewage fungus and appalling smells, levels of nitrates and phosphates and ammonia far higher than they should be, and it's just causing an absolute nightmare in the village.
Goodness me, I thought we'd solved this problem with Joseph Bazalgette in the 1860s, but clearly things have got worse since. But I wonder, Robert, if you think, are parties being straight with us when they try and tell us that we can fix this very easily, we just need to pass a new regulation? Ultimately, to fix this big problem, it's going to require big money, is it not?
Absolutely. It's going to cause big money. And I think we need, instead of just fining these companies, we need to find a different way. So instead of just taking the money from them, we actually need to force them to use the money that we get from them to actually do the work. So it's not about taking it away from them. It's about saying, right, we've fined you this much. That will have to be used now to fix the problem. That's all. Otherwise, these things are never going to go away. Because we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds now to do these sorts of repairs, which is far more than I've heard from any of the parties as yet.
And Robert, just before we let you go, can you just describe how bad this stench is? Is it affecting everyone who lives in the village, or is it only in some areas right by the river? Just explain, paint a picture for us.
Yeah, the village is kind of lives in a dip. So the centre of the village is you come away from the road, you drop down into this dip, and that's where the river runs. Of an evening, sort of after about 7, 8 o'clock, as the sort of temperature drops and the wind stops blowing, a smell rises out of the river and fills the centre of the village. So pretty much everybody that lives in the shop, in the centre, all suffer from that smell. And, some of the people I've spoken to, they feel like they're being attacked. They're putting things into their keyholes to stop the smells leaking into their houses.
Wow.
It's pretty disgusting.
Goodness me. Well, thank you very much indeed for telling us all about it. And I do hope that something can be done to rectify this. I mean, you don't want to be living in a beautiful village like Chalfont St Giles and have that ruining your everyday. Thank you so much. Robert Gill, Parish Councillor, Chalfont St Giles.
Now, on the way, we'll be heading back to Wimbledon as British tennis ace Andy Murray pulls out of the singles competition. More on that after this.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance Card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe, and only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News, weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 3, and the Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has been speaking in Derbyshire about the choices that voters have on Thursday.
One of the big things on the ballot on Thursday is putting an end to this government of self-entitlement, in my views. We've had a government where they made COVID rules and told all of you to obey them, and then they disobeyed them themselves. I thought that was pretty disrespectful. They handed out COVID contracts to their mates at huge cost, taxpayers' cost, and then as you saw in the election, the first instinct when the date of election was known was not how do I get to the country with my message, but how quickly can I get to the bookies.
Right, well, those were the words of Keir Starmer a little bit earlier on. But let's finish, why not, with a bit of sporting news. Very disappointing sporting news, actually. Andy Murray will not play the singles tournament at Wimbledon today. Having been battling to recover from back surgery, he's decided that he's only going to play the doubles.
Yeah, so the two-time former champion had been battling to recover from that back surgery last weekend, but has since run out of time with his first-round clash, which had been scheduled for this afternoon.
Well, shall we speak to Charlie Peters, who is in Wimbledon for us with the very latest. Charlie, you've been speaking to people. How disappointed are they to learn that Andy Murray will not be competing in the singles?
Significant disappointment. In fact, many of the people that we spoke to queuing up to get into the courts here hadn't learnt that Andy Murray was not going to be playing at 6:30 against Thomas Markle, the competitor from the Czech Republic, for this first round match in his last season in men's tennis at Wimbledon. Now, the 37-year-old Andy Murray, he was recovering from a back injury from surgery that was conducted 10 days ago with a cyst on his spinal cord being removed. Now, on Sunday, his team said that the area where the surgery was conducted, that was no longer an issue, but he hadn't fully recovered feeling in his right leg because it was causing some nerve damage there, causing some pain and limiting his range of motion. Now, yesterday, we saw Andy Murray practicing against Kyle Edmund, the British #1. He played 2 sets there, actually beat him in both of those sets. But today, this morning, he said he could not play in the 6:30 centre court match. So we will now learn that he will play with his brother Jamie in the doubles on Thursday. This will be the first and last time that they compete alongside each other. And in a statement, Andy Murray's team said that unfortunately, despite working incredibly hard on his recovery since his operation just over a week ago, Andy has taken the very difficult decision not to play the singles this year. As you can imagine, he is extremely disappointed, but has confirmed that he will be playing in the doubles with Jamie and looks forward to competing at Wimbledon for the last time. Well, earlier today, let's hear what people here in Wimbledon had to say about Andy Murray's withdrawal.
Not surprised given the press recently, but yeah, sad because it's his last tournament, isn't last Wimbledon apparently, so yes, very sad.
We're really disappointed, yes, it would have been lovely to see him in the singles.
I like Andy Murray. I don't know that he's, I just came to see him playing, so he's not playing today.
It's a shame. We thought we'd be here for a swan song, but we're not. But we'll cheer on Jack Draper anyway.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but at least we've got another Brit to cheer on in the third game on, so that's all good for us.
3 Grand Slams and 2 Olympic gold medals. But since 2017, after a hip replacement, Andy Murray has not made the second week of a Grand Slam since. In his final season, it wasn't to be here either.
Well, he's had an absolutely fantastic career. Thank you very much indeed. Charlie Peters, our reporter there outside Wimbledon. A disappointment, but good that he's still playing the doubles.
Yes, good that he still gets a swan song in kind, of a sort, although perhaps not the singular glory that he was hoping for. Well, that's it from us today on Good Afternoon Britain. Of course, join us again at midday tomorrow, where we'll bring you the very last day of campaigning in this general election. But up next, it's Martin Daubney.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. I'm here with your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We are going to see some fairly wet weather pushing its way southwards across many parts as we go through the rest of today and overnight. That's due to a system that's currently just to the northwest of the UK. For the time being, though, as we go through the end of today, there is still some dry and at times sunny weather across parts of England and Wales, with a few showers to watch out for. But further north of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England turning increasingly cloudy and also very very wet. That rain and cloud is going to push its way southwards as we go through the night, and because of the unsettled weather, it is going to stay pretty mild. Temperatures generally staying in double figures. So a fairly wet start to the day for many of us, but some of the heavier rain is going to quite quickly clear away towards the east. If we take a closer look and across some southern parts by 7-8 o'clock, apart from a bit of rain across East Anglia perhaps, there should be some dry, perhaps even brighter weather for a time. Different story further north, outbreaks of rain and quite a lot of cloud for many places, with something a little bit more persistent pushing into parts of Scotland and also Northern Ireland as we go through the morning. And this band of something a bit more persistent is then going to gradually make its way eastwards as we go through the day. So staying pretty soggy for Scotland and Northern Ireland. England and Wales, some further outbreaks of rain. Don't look as heavy as what we'll have seen earlier on, but it is going to stay generally pretty cloudy. Temperatures are still going to be a little bit below average for the time of year. We may just about scrape into the low 20s Celsius, but because of the cloud and the wet weather and for some of us blustery winds, it's going to feel a little disappointing. Later on as we go through tomorrow evening, there will be some brighter skies developing across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a scattering of showers mixed in with these, and then some clear spells spreading to many parts. On Thursday we can expect some blustery and wet weather in the north. On Friday it's looking wetter for more of us. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening